Diana, the pink-haired girl, looks crushed as her heartfelt confession is coldly ignored.
A rejection follows as her carefully chosen birthday gift is unceremoniously returned.
Neglected for hours, Diana waits alone in a vast, dimly lit estate. Driven to misery, Diana flees to the academy immediately following a joyless wedding. The silver-haired male lead's frustrating personality prompts a fundamental question about his character. Ian Cloud's childhood trauma left him emotionally guarded, pushing the world away behind heavy chains. The black-haired reader stares in disbelief at her phone as the novel abruptly ends. Diana forgives Ian with a kiss, leaving the reader outraged by the sudden happy ending. She screams at the author, unable to accept that the jerk male lead was forgiven. Frustrated, she prepares to leave a piece of her mind amidst a sea of fan praise. Her anger flares as she realizes just how much she hates the story's direction. Despite the author's talent, she laments that all that skill was wasted on Ian's story. Her fingers fly across the screen as she rants about the unfair treatment of Diana. She mocks the fans who justify Ian's toxic behavior as a sympathetic character trait. She takes a deep breath, desperately trying to find her inner peace after the infuriating read. Distracted by her rage, she fails to notice the blinding headlights as a horn blares loudly. In a tragic twist, her wish for a reincarnation truck comes true as darkness takes her. The phone glows with ethereal light, signaling the start of an impossible transition. She awakens in a lavish room, realizing she has been reborn into another world. A heavy silence hangs in the grand room as she takes in her new surroundings. She bolts upright, her heart racing as the reality of her situation starts to sink in. With wide green eyes, she stares at her reflection, stunned by her own unfamiliar face. Realizing she can't just sit there, she prepares to figure out whose body she inhabits. The memory of the bloody phone confirms she has truly entered the novel's world. Standing before a mirror, she nervously wonders which character's fate she has inherited. She prays she hasn't become Diana, as taking over her favorite character's body feels wrong. A sigh of relief escapes her lips when she confirms she is definitely not Diana. Though she is not the heroine, the new face in the mirror feels oddly familiar. She recalls the description of Eloise Alpheus, the second daughter destined for a loveless marriage. Horror dawns on her as she realizes she is the woman destined to marry Ian. She collapses onto the carpet, certain that her life is effectively over. Tears well up as she laments the cruel twist of fate that placed her here. She thrashes in frustration, wishing she had been reborn as a random rock instead. Staring at her reflection, she questions why she was chosen for this miserable role. Cold energy and thorny vines mirror the oppressive fate that now binds her. A flicker of hope emerges as she realizes the wedding might not have happened yet. If she isn't married, she is determined to change her future and avoid Ian entirely. Her heart sinks as she spots Ian Cloud's family crest hanging mockingly above the mirror. A hollow, hysterical smile forms as the truth of her marriage becomes undeniable. The shock is too much to bear, leaving her spirit feeling crushed and defeated. Her internal rage is interrupted by a maid's cautious voice calling for her attention. She spots the maid peeking through the door, who claims she didn't see anything. Despite her inner turmoil, she speaks with a grace and elegance she never possessed before. The maid reminds her that breakfast is ready, signaling the start of her new life. She reflects on the cold efficiency of her relationship with her new, distant husband. She dismisses the maid, steeling herself for the encounter waiting for her downstairs. She groans, collapsing back onto the bed in one final moment of despair. Resigned to her fate, she realizes she must face the day and her husband. She lies defeated, remembering how the author's obsession with Ian's beauty ruined everything. The woman with long, dark brownish-gray hair enters the dining room, shifting the scene to a tense morning. Seeing Ian Cloud's face, the long-haired woman contemplates spitting on him despite his stunning beauty. Her internal monologue reflects a lingering, deep-seated rage toward the man sitting before her. She quickly catches herself, realizing her aggressive thoughts don't match her current situation. Ian Cloud, the silver-haired man, eats with a cold, aristocratic grace amidst a floral setting. Though frustrated, she begrudgingly admits that the author's praise for Ian's looks was well-founded.
Ian interrupts her thoughts, bluntly questioning why she is just standing there staring at him.
She recalls his terrifying nicknames, the Tyrant Prince and the Devil Prince, with a forced smile. Ian dismissively tells her to leave if she won't eat as she joins him at the table. Even his beautiful voice irritates her, making the silence of the meal feel even more unbearable. Ian stares coldly, prompting her to wish his voice belonged to anyone else but him. A heavy, awkward silence fills the grand hall as they eat together without a single word. Gripping her spoon, she wonders how they both maintain such a hollow, performative relationship. She watches Ian wipe his mouth, curious why he is so formally dressed this early. Sensing her gaze, Ian tells her to just get to the point if she has something to say. Frustrated by his arrogance, she asks if he is headed somewhere today. Chibi Ian sighs as she notes her ability to read his simple expressions like an open book. Ian announces he is attending the monthly meeting at the Imperial Palace as he prepares to leave. A portrait reminds her of his high status as a Grand Duke with royal blood.
In a flashback, young Ian stands with a golden-haired boy, the future emperor. Unlike most stories, the emperor has always been fond of Ian since they were children.
Ian kneels to accept the prestigious title of Special Advisor to the Imperial Knights.
She laments the extreme favoritism the author showed Ian, showering him with wealth and honor. Back at the table, she considers the author's obsession with him to be a literal illness. Ian stands to depart, coldly stating that he is running late for his duties today. She bids him a forced farewell as she continues her joyless breakfast alone.
As he walks away, she watches him with suspicion, wondering if he was being sarcastic.
Ian stops and looks back, mockingly telling her to wipe the sauce off her face.
Her anger flares as she wishes she could punch him, but his swordmaster status stops her. She reflects on the original Eloise Alpheus, the beautiful but cold second daughter of a marquis.
Known as the Ice Princess, Eloise was once the perfect flower of high society. Their marriage was a calculated business deal, with Eloise acting as a pawn for her family. The original Eloise accepted her role pragmatically, viewing the marriage as a lucrative business expansion.
She stands beside her father, the Marquis, who callously sold his daughter for corporate interests.
Checking her notes, she calculates that they have been married for over 2 years now.
She scoffs at the idea of being a newlywed given their icy and distant dynamic. She realizes that Diana, the story's true heroine, is scheduled to return in just 1 year.
Despair takes over as she slams her head onto the desk, hating the terrible timing. She envisions Diana, knowing Ian will demand a divorce soon after the heroine's return.
Horror sinks in as she realizes she is the villainess destined to make Diana suffer tremendously.
She breaks down in tears, devastated to be a hardship for her favorite character.
Looking at the calendar, she sees there is exactly 1 year until everything changes.
A new idea forms as she considers using her current power as the Grand Duchess. With a sudden, fierce determination, she slams her hands down, ready to change her fate.
She resolves to rehabilitate Ian into a perfect gentleman before Diana ever arrives.
Her knowledge of Ian's jerk personality becomes her primary tool for this impossible mission.
"Wait for me, Diana!" she shouts, stepping forward with newfound confidence and purpose.
A manic laugh echoes over the estate as she vows to fix her trash husband. She returns to her desk, calling for her maid to begin the first steps of the plan.
The maid bows respectfully, introducing herself as Bibi to her determined mistress.
Eloise reflects on her past indifference to her maid, Bibi, during her previous life.
Bibi is startled as her mistress mentions hearing an interesting story from the capital.
Through a sunlit window, Eloise probes for rumors regarding herself and the Grand Duke.
The brown-haired maid is utterly shocked, reacting with a pale face and wide eyes. Bibi hesitates, insisting the rumors aren't worth bothering the Duchess with at this time.
Eloise demands honesty, warning her maid that she hates having to repeat herself twice.
With a chilling smile, Eloise specifically asks to hear the scandals involving her marriage.
Bibi collapses in fear, but Eloise promises she won't face any punishment for the truth.
Chibi Eloise promises no punishment but threatens to distance herself if Bibi stays silent.
Trembling, Bibi reveals that people call Eloise the hollow shell and ghost of the household. Eloise calmly processes the rumor, unfazed by the harsh social labels being used against her.
Having heard the truth, Eloise dismisses the distraught maid for the rest of the day.
Surrounded by blooming roses, Eloise smiles as she begins to formulate a daring new plan. Bibi is overwhelmed by the Duchess's unexpected mercy, her eyes filling with tears of relief. The maid rushes out of the room while Eloise watches with a calculated, gentle expression.
Sitting alone, Eloise repeats her ghostly title, her resolve hardening with every passing second. A dark aura surrounds Eloise as she declares that Ian Cloud is as good as dead.
She recalls her previous life, which was filled with stories from various niche literary genres. Slamming the desk, Eloise reminds herself that those with the numbers always hold the advantage.
Watching a carriage from the window, she ponders Ian's decade of intense hardship and isolation.
Ian stands tall, yet he remains shackled by childhood trauma and deeply suppressed emotions.
Eloise reviews documents, fearing the current rumors will eventually turn into accusations against Diana.
Determined to protect the future heroine, Eloise refuses to let the scandals continue unchecked. A sharp talk sounds as Eloise slams the rolled paper down, ready for a confrontation.
Fired up, Eloise vows to teach the stubborn Grand Duke a very proper lesson today.
A rhythmic talk sounds at the door, and Ian invites the visitor to enter.
Eloise enters with a radiant smile, catching the silver-haired Duke off guard in his office.
Noting his exhaustion, Chibi Eloise announces she has something urgent to discuss with him.
Ian reminds her of their agreement not to disturb each other outside of breakfast hours.
Chibi Eloise insists the matter is special, ignoring the Duke's arrogant and skeptical attitude.
Ian remains unmoved, claiming he is already aware of the names people call him.
Eloise is visibly irritated by his coldness, mentally labeling her husband an absolute jerk.
Ian questions if he is supposed to be concerned about her reputation as well.
Eloise is appalled by his lack of concern for the insults being thrown at her.
He asks if it's his responsibility, prompting Eloise to push back with firm logic.
When Ian falls silent, Eloise takes his lack of rebuttal as a quiet admission.
Bored, Chibi Ian tells her to get to the point of her sudden visit.
Eloise's temper flares as she realizes he intends to offer no apology or comfort.
Looming over him, Eloise stares down the Duke with her arms crossed in defiance.
Ian leans back, sensing that his wife has prepared an unconventional solution for them. He warns her against romantic cliches, causing Chibi Eloise to recoil in pure horror.
The mere thought of wanting his heart makes Chibi Eloise feel physically ill with revulsion. Ian is confused by her visceral reaction and asks what she actually wants from him.
Eloise asks if he believes the common saying that people can never truly change.
Leaning in close, she reveals that she doesn't believe in such a pessimistic outlook. The air grows thick with tension as Eloise brings her face inches from his.
Eloise makes a bold declaration, vowing to be the one who changes him.
A profound silence falls over the grand office as the couple locks eyes intensely.
Stunned, Ian struggles to process the Duchess's sudden and aggressive claim of reform.
Standing tall with her hands on her hips, Eloise confirms her intent to change him. Reflections on her reputation shift, Eloise resolves to change her fate as the Duchy's ghost.
Eloise bluntly tells the stunned Chibi Ian that she expects very little from him.
Determined to protect Diana, Eloise plans to rehabilitate Ian before disappearing from the story forever.
Neglect and cruel rumors have reduced Eloise to a mere piece of furniture within the estate.
Ian remains unaffected by rumors, his royal blood and imperial favor shielding his ironclad honor.
Eloise confronts Ian across the desk, insisting that their stagnant relationship is a shared problem.
Despite Ian's high status, Eloise realizes his prestige won't be tarnished by rumors of their marriage. A steady pan sounds as Ian stares intently, his honorable reputation making him a formidable opponent.
Ian notes the capital's buzzing rumors, his hand resting firmly on the documents before him.
Eloise proposes a one-year ultimatum, arguing that their current arrangement causes more harm than good. If things don't change, Eloise vows to sort matters out, leaving Ian confused by her intent.
A heavy scale symbolizes her resolve to live in total silence if their situation doesn't improve.
Her quill is ready as she offers Ian the ultimate escape, a formal divorce. Ian is visibly stunned when Eloise suggests he find a more suitable Grand Duchess after they part.
With a cheerful laugh, Eloise encourages him to seek someone better once she is gone.
She envisions a future where Diana is happy, determined to finalize the divorce within 1 year.
Eloise demands cooperation, refusing to spend her life shackled to a humiliating and hollow title.
A rhythmic talk sounds as Ian considers the offer, realizing he has nothing to lose. Ian questions the details of her plan, prompting Eloise to stand firm and set her terms. Touching the paper with a soft souk, Eloise prepares to list 2 vital suggestions for their year. She envisions a performative marriage, demanding public respect and private time together for mental training.
Ian is skeptical about the mandatory time, while Chibi Eloise plots his total reform through education.
Eloise remains serious, viewing their mandatory interactions as a necessary class for the hopeless Grand Duke. Ian's hand freezes midair, a silent meomchis echoing his disbelief as he asks if she's serious. Sparks fly as the frustrated Chibi Eloise snaps, insisting she isn't here to joke around.
Ian reluctantly agrees to the 1-year term, expecting things to return to normal afterward.
Eloise smiles brightly, but internally she is already savoring the freedom of their eventual divorce. Planning their schedule, Eloise pushes for more weekend time, while Ian questions her businesslike approach. Ian rubs his temple in exasperation, finally compromising on 1 full day during the weekend.
Eloise celebrates her victory, proud of her superior negotiation skills as she leaves Ian behind.
Leaving the proposal behind as a parting gift, Eloise exits the room with newfound confidence.
At the Grand Estate, Bibi arrives to announce herself as the day begins for her mistress.
Bibi offers breakfast and assistance, but a determined Eloise declines, ready to take immediate action. Confusion washes over Bibi as she struggles to process her mistress's sudden and uncharacteristic refusal. Surrounded by flowers, Eloise instructs Bibi to call the butler and prepare for an outing. Bibi is caught off guard by the urgency, stuttering in surprise as Eloise sits ready. With an authoritative air, Eloise confirms they are leaving right now, leaving Bibi stunned. Bibi rushes to comply while a chibi Eloise reflects on her successful negotiation with Ian. Recalling their frozen, silent breakfasts, Eloise decides she no longer needs to force their morning interactions. A gentle tock-tock sounds as Bibi returns, finding Eloise prepared for the day ahead. The maids swarm the room, eager to dress Eloise with more elegance than she's ever shown. As they brush her hair and choose sensible shoes, the maids marvel at Eloise's impressive stature. Chibi Eloise feels overwhelmed by the maid's sudden enthusiasm for her uncharacteristic trip to town. A tall, distinguished butler stands ready in the hallway to assist the Grand Duchess. Eloise greets the butler, announcing her plans to visit the main street for the first time.
With a cheerful expression, Eloise requests 2 blank checks to fund her ambitious plans.
The butler is visibly shaken by the request, while a confused Eloise wonders why he's so surprised. He agrees to the checks while asking about breakfast, his brow sweating from the unusual interaction. Eloise dismisses the idea of a shared meal, telling him to let Ian eat alone. A flare of spiteful energy emphasizes her desire to let her husband suffer a solitary breakfast. Ian sits in brooding silence at the massive, empty table, eating his breakfast alone. The radiant image of the heroine, Diana, shines through the narrator's focused thoughts and memories.
Ian continues his solitary meal as his butler stands nearby in quiet, watchful attendance.
Ian dismisses his butler, who bows respectfully and exits the grand dining hall in silence. Staring at his meal, Ian ponders the strange and sudden changes in his wife's behavior.
He recalls Eloise's defiant resolution to rehabilitate him, finding her newfound confidence utterly baffling.
Chewing thoughtfully, Ian reflects on how she barged into his office and now skips breakfast. The memory of her cheerful offer of divorce flashes through his mind, further unsettling him. Ian freezes before a sharp clack sounds as he drops his fork onto the plate. Exasperated, Ian sighs, finding the unpredictable shifts in their relationship to be incredibly annoying. Outside, a beautiful sun-drenched day settles over the bustling city and its towering white buildings. Vibrant yellow flowers bloom in the garden, mirroring the bright and clear morning weather. Eloise confirms her departure as Bibi presents a case full of blank checks and certificates. Bibi notes this is Eloise's first visit to a seamstress, earning a brief, distracted acknowledgement. Beneath her elegant hat, a secret, determined smile spreads across Eloise's face.
She envisions Diana's eventual arrival, committed to clearing a smooth path for the future heroine.
Refusing to be a shut-in, Eloise laughs while a nervous Bibi follows her lead. Striking a confident pose, Eloise prepares to depart for her first mission in the capital. The image of a smiling, pink-haired girl serves as a reminder of her ultimate goal. Eloise understands that her first task is mastering the complex social flow of the capital. Walking with Bibi, Eloise reminds herself that knowing the enemy is key to every victory. She recognizes that in this era, clothing stores are the true pillars of high society. These boutiques act as the central hubs where all critical rumors and news are exchanged. To her, the social cycle is a fierce battlefield that requires strategy rather than swords. Bibi is startled, questioning why they have veered away from the main seamstress street. Wandering through a dim back alley, Bibi points out the absence of any notable shops. Eloise instructs her maid to follow quietly, her destination already set in stone. Scanning the narrow alleyway, Eloise searches for the specific, unassuming shop from her memories. A sudden firm knock sounds as Eloise reaches a plain wooden door, much to Bibi's concern. Bibi tries to suggest the capital's largest dress shop instead of this humble, hidden location. Eloise cuts her off with a chilling gaze, stating she did not ask for an opinion. Bibi quickly yields as Eloise notes that this struggling store is currently her only option. A solid click sounds as Eloise grips the handle, ready to enter the mysterious boutique. Inside, a blue-haired woman looks up in surprise, asking who has entered her quiet shop.
The shopkeeper, Madame Z, is visibly shaken upon recognizing the high status of her visitor.
Madame Z bows low as the Grand Duchess announces her intent to browse the collection. Sweat beads on Madame Z's forehead as she struggles to process the sudden, prestigious arrival. With an authoritative gesture, Eloise demands to see the shop's dresses without any further delay. Madame Z leads the way to a small, sparse rack containing only a few garments. Ashamed, Madame Z admits their budget is nearly depleted, showing the store's dire financial state.
Eloise recalls that in a year, this specific shop will become Diana's greatest asset.
She envisions the elegant pink heels Diana will eventually design with Madame Zed's loyal support. By intervening now, Eloise plans to eliminate the struggles Diana would have faced in the original story.
A dark, manic delight fills Eloise as she realizes she is creating her own intelligence network.
Bibi looks on in confusion while Madame Zed waits nervously for the Duchess's next move. Madame Zed offers custom work, but Eloise interrupts, announcing she will buy the entire stock. Total shock washes over the room as both Bibi and Madame Zed gape at the request. Stunned, Madame Zed asks for clarification, unable to believe someone would buy every single item. When asked for a reason, Eloise simply states a noblewoman requires no excuse to buy dresses. Overwhelmed by the sudden windfall, a wide-eyed Madame Zed trembles with sheer joyous disbelief. Madame Zed nervously asks the Duchess if any design adjustments are required for the dresses. Narrations reveal that Madame Zed's stubborn pride originally led to her historical ruin.
Cobwebs and dust highlight the clothing store's desperate need for immediate financial help.
Eloise politely declines adjustments, opting for alterations that simply fit her body. Bibi presents a case of certificates as Eloise prepares to seal their strategic partnership. Eloise joyfully announces her official sponsorship of the boutique under her title as Duchess. She orders the shopkeeper to deliver the finished garments to the mansion within 1 week. Eloise reminds Madame Zed that accurate measurements are vital for her future patronage.
Madame Zed pledges her absolute loyalty while Bibi remains visibly startled and anxious.
The shopkeeper immediately prepares to take measurements, her eyes sparkling with newfound determination. Madame Zed enthusiastically praises Eloise's posture, suggesting a flattering off-shoulder dress design. The tailor gushes over Eloise's beautiful waist, calling her a rare spinal beauty. Eloise is left blinking in pure confusion at the shopkeeper's strange choice of words. Madame Zed's relentless chatter during the fitting process begins to tire the Duchess.
Eloise reflects on this spark in Zed's eyes, noting money's undeniable power.
Eloise departs with a quip as Madame Zed offers a deep, respectful bow. Eloise plans to use Madame Zed as an informant until the heroine Diana returns. A serene title card captures Eloise and Bibi walking through a flower-lined path. Returning home, Eloise realizes she spent hours buying a large stack of books. As she enters, she spots Ian standing motionless at the top of the stairs. A heavy silence fills the hall as the couple locks eyes in a standoff. Ian begins a slow, deliberate descent down the stairs toward the waiting Duchess. He coldly suggests they aren't on speaking terms as Eloise brushes past her.
Ian turns sharply, questioning why she is only just now arriving at the mansion.
Eloise casually confirms her outing while Ian notes how late the hour is. She glances at the grand clock, realizing it is already well past midday.
Ian remarks on her busy schedule, noting she skipped breakfast and returned late.
Eloise smiles, realizing that her missed breakfast has clearly bothered the silver-haired Duke. She reminds him of his own rule to avoid seeing each other outside breakfast. Ian claims her activities don't matter as long as she maintains her duties. He expects her to uphold her obligations as the Duchess despite her recent behavior. When Ian attempts to discuss mansion affairs, Eloise flatly refuses to cooperate. She questions why she should fulfill duties alone when he shows no interest. Eloise points out his neglect, questioning why the burden of reputation falls on her.
She resolves to return only as much effort as Ian has shown now.
Looming over him, she warns she can be an angel or a devil. Eloise cheerily declares that from now on, their relationship is a give and take.
She leaves Ian standing in a daze, walking away with a triumphant stride.
Ian looks back in disbelief as Eloise continues to defy his every expectation. Sticking her tongue out, Eloise finds Ian's sudden concern and protests utterly annoying. The full moon glows over the quiet roof and chimneys of the grand mansion. In her room, Eloise yawns while reading a complex book on mechanical education. She hopes she can follow the book's difficult contents to aid her reform plan.
Eloise resolves to turn the cold-blooded bastard into a proper, feeling human being.
Deciding she needs to clear her head, Eloise prepares for a moonlit walk. She steps into the night garden, excited to explore the grounds in private. Eloise wanders the mansion exterior, wanting to enjoy it before Diana eventually arrives. Stopping at a gated entrance, Eloise spots something captivating amidst the blooming roses.
She is awestruck by the sheer beauty of the mansion's moonlit private gardens.
The grand estate and its fountains stand majestic under the shimmering night sky. Eloise sneezes suddenly as a chill from the night air catches her off guard.
Shivering, she realizes she dressed far too lightly for the cold evening garden walk.
Exhausted, she decides she cannot stay outside much longer and prepares to head back. High above the hall, the silver-haired Duke Ian stands alone in his dimly lit office. Deep in thought, Ian wonders if his wife had truly been crying during their encounter.
He remains motionless by the window, brooding over the growing distance between them.
A red-haired man, Kyle, enters the room carrying an impossibly tall stack of books.
Kyle complains about his workload and the Duke's unreasonable expectations for his late arrival.
He groans about the physical toll of using long-distance magic circles for his missions. Kyle presents an overwhelming pile of documents that must be sorted by next week.
While the Duke works, Kyle jokingly questions why he continues to serve such a master.
Ian looks up with a piercing gaze, asking if his leadership style is truly harsh.
Kyle laments his lack of sleep before suddenly shifting the topic to the Grand Duchess. Kyle is visibly stunned when the Duke unexpectedly brings up his wife's recent behavior. He sarcastically asks if Ian is terminally ill after hearing such out-of-character concerned questions. Baffled, Kyle notes that this is the first time the Duke has ever mentioned her. Ian recalls their wedding day, reflecting on a marriage built solely on mutual strategic interest. He considers his ghostly wife and her sudden, defiant demand for a total divorce. Memories of her cheerful laughter clash with the reality of her currently cold demeanor. Ian's expression hardens as he struggles to reconcile these two vastly different versions of Eloise.
Kyle reacts with extreme shock, questioning if the Duchess truly asked for a separation.
With a concerned look, the red-haired aide asks if the Duke offered her any comfort. Ian dismisses the idea, finding no reason to offer consolation for her recent choices. Infuriated, Kyle calls him inhuman and blames him for his wife's obvious emotional distress. Ian defends his actions, citing their agreed-upon rules of avoidance and his provided support. Kyle begs for better employee treatment while Ian sharply orders him to be quiet.
A sudden, sharp flinch shakes Ian's hand as Kyle asks if he knows her birthday.
Silence follows the question, highlighting the Duke's complete lack of personal knowledge about her.
Vibrant flags and falling leaves mark the upcoming Grand Autumn Festival held in the city.
Ian dismisses the event as trivial, while Kyle continues to place all the blame on him. Ian vividly remembers Eloise smiling while suggesting he find a more suitable Grand Duchess. Kyle screams in disbelief as the reality of the impending divorce finally sinks in. Annoyed, Ian tells his aide to stop making such a loud and unnecessary scene.
Kyle argues that even her legendary patience has reached its limit due to his neglect.
He reveals gossip about her buying an entire boutique and several romance novels today.
Kyle slams the desk, demanding to know what these drastic changes in her heart signify. He presents the image of an elegant pink gown as evidence of her shopping spree. Stacks of romance novels represent her new, unexpected interest in finding a different life.
Eloise stands amidst shadowy vines, appearing more beautiful and independent than ever before.
Kyle speculates she has a change of heart or even another gentleman in mind. He threatens to quit if the divorce proceeds, but Ian remains stern and unmoved. Ian coldly offers to let him quit immediately, prompting a terrified Kyle to retract everything. Ian dismisses his noisy aide, who salutes his loyalty before quickly exiting the office. Alone again, Ian recalls her admission of no longer being able to endure for him. He stares down at his desk, her words echoing painfully in the quiet room. The next morning, Eloise sleeps peacefully, tucked safely under her thick, warm blankets. She wakes up feeling refreshed, delighted by the rare gift of a deep, dreamless sleep. Checking the large clock, she realizes she has missed the scheduled breakfast hour again. Smiling, she rings for her maid, happy to have successfully avoided another encounter. As someone knocks, Eloise prepares to start her day and eat her meal in peace.
Eloise stands gracefully in the garden, her long hair flowing as she enjoys the serene morning.
Looking thoughtful, the Duchess ponders where she should spend her time today. Ian sits silently at the table reading, while an annoyed Eloise wonders why he is still present. Eloise questions the Duke's lingering presence, worrying his silent staring will lead to indigestion. Ian defensively asks if there is a problem, while Eloise internally contemplates using her fork as a weapon. Glaring at the table, she decides a knife would be a much more effective choice for her frustration. Eloise bluntly tells Ian she is only tolerating him because of his status as a swordmaster.
Ian points out he is simply eating, leaving Eloise disappointed by his lack of a sincere apology.
Shaking her head, Eloise realizes expecting him to become a decent person overnight is far too much. Ian suddenly brings up her proposed training, indicating he has been considering her offer. Eloise smiles skeptically, wondering what imperial excuse he will use to decline her request. Grabbing her fork with intense determination, she resolves that this plan cannot be canceled. To her shock, Ian agrees to the full weekend schedule she originally suggested. Stunned into silence, the Duchess stares in pure disbelief at his sudden, unexpected cooperation. Ian confirms he intends to honor her proposal for both days of the weekend.
Eloise studies him closely, wondering if he hit his head or experienced some strange change of heart.
Ian rises from the table, formally declaring that they will proceed with the weekend plans.
Noticing he is still in uniform, Eloise realizes he waited just to deliver this news.
The silver-haired Duke stands amidst blooming flowers, his expression unreadable and stern. Ian turns back to emphasize his willingness to try the give-and-take relationship she demanded.
Eloise remains frozen in shock as the reality of his compliance finally begins to sink in.
A decorative title card announces that the anticipated weekend has arrived very quickly.
During the wait, Eloise occupied herself with romance novels and quiet night walks.
An elegant tea set with pastries is prepared on a stone table in the lush garden.
Ian questions why she wanted to claim his entire weekend just for a simple tea session. Eloise calmly sips her tea, ignoring his impatient attitude while maintaining her perfect composure. She cheerfully suggests they begin their training with a light chat to build rapport. Ian's intense, unblinking gaze begins to make Eloise feel like he is staring a hole through her.
Eloise explains that they must understand each other before any real progress can be made.
Ian repeats her words about understanding the student with a skeptical and confused tone. Narration reveals Ian's legendary social coldness, which once made people pity his childhood friend, Diana.
A memory shows Ian dismissively rejecting Diana's feelings before her departure for the academy. Exasperated, Eloise scolds him for being completely oblivious to the feelings of those around him.
Eloise insists on spending time together to fix their ignorance. Ian reluctantly agrees to the session.
Sipping her tea, she confidently predicts that Ian will be grateful to her within a year. Ian notes that she speaks with strange certainty, as if she already knows what the future holds. With a heavy sigh, the Duke agrees to attempt a conversation as part of her training.
Ian questions the necessity of greetings, while a frustrated Eloise marks his lack of basic social grace.
She explains that normal people use greetings to build bonds, something he has always neglected. Ian describes her morning activities in a mechanical, literal way, completely missing the social point.
Eloise seethes with annoyance, noting she would have struck him if he weren't so dangerous.
She reiterates that greetings are about connection, a concept the Duke seems unable to grasp. Ian dismisses her advice as useless, refusing to see the value in such trivial social interactions. Eloise jokingly threatens to read a scandal sheet instead, puzzling the stoic Duke. Ian attempts by repeating her earlier words verbatim, much to her exasperation. Forcing a smile, Eloise decides to accept his robotic repetition as a small, pathetic first step. Ian asks if she feels anything special toward the flowers they see every single day. He flatly declares he feels nothing, walking away and proving his emotional wall remains intact. Eloise laughs through her teeth, desperately trying to remain calm despite his impossible personality. The garden roses seem to tremble as the awkward, tense atmosphere of the meeting lingers. Ian stands amidst drifting cherry blossoms, his face set in a characteristic, unreadable expression. Ian points at the garden's roses, stating they are simply very red, much to Eloise's stunned disappointment. Eloise questions Ian about his knowledge while silently doubting she can rehabilitate him within a year. Eloise explains that women prefer men who communicate, but Ian reacts with a bored shrug. Eloise gestures gracefully, reminding the Duke that she is also a woman who values communication. Ian's severe expression prompts Eloise to complain internally about his lack of social warmth. The Duchess explains that appreciating flowers together is far better than simply identifying their color. Eloise suggests simple phrases for the garden, hoping he can at least master basic social pleasantries. Ian dismisses her advice as empty words, causing an infuriated Eloise to wish she could punch him. Eloise clenches her fist, struggling to maintain her composure after Ian's cold rejection of her advice. While sipping tea, Eloise decides to introduce a new rule to their rapport-building training sessions. Eloise places her cup down firmly, declaring that all unnecessary questions are now strictly prohibited. Eloise encourages Ian to speak kindly, insisting that every woman appreciates receiving sweet, thoughtful words. The Duchess looks radiant as she continues her lesson, her hair adorned with a white flower. Ian reacts with a face of pure disgust, clearly repulsed by the idea of using sentimental language. Letting out a weary sigh, Eloise realizes that training Ian will be an uphill emotional battle. Ian drinks his tea unbothered while Eloise wonders why a single sweet word is so difficult. Looking at the flowers, Eloise reflects on her progress, hoping her lesson made some small impact. Ian brings up the blank check she used, and Eloise calmly acknowledges her recent large purchase. Reflected in her tea, Eloise explains her shopping trip after Ian asks what she bought. Eloise declares her intention to join social circles again, refusing to remain isolated in the duchy. She explains that she must gather allies to support Diana's standing in the imperial court.
A dark aura surrounds Ian, making Eloise wonder if he is actually upset about the money spent.
Ian questions her sudden social ambition, noting her lack of interest in society since their marriage.
Eloise sips her tea, explaining that her mind has changed regarding staying stuck in the duchy.
Ian repeats her words about meeting people, his face clouded with a new, dark suspicion.
The Duke suggests that something must have happened to trigger her sudden shift in social interest.
Eloise sips her tea, bluntly telling Ian that her reasons are none of his concern.
Ian's eyes narrow as he sarcastically asks if she is planning to meet a new man. Eloise smiles brightly, confirming her intent to find influential people who can specifically support Diana's future.
Eloise notices the sharp, sarcastic edge in Ian's tone as a ripple disturbs her tea.
Eloise requests Ian's cooperation, needing the prestige of the duchy's name for her social plans.
Ian's gaze darkens with intense suspicion as he questions her plan to leverage her duchess status.
Ian repeats his question about her meeting new people, and Eloise confirms her intention with a smile.
The Duke warns her not to cause any scandals while she remains part of his household.
Ian coldly reminds her that as the Duchess, her reputation is still linked to the duchy.
He states that his agreement to cooperate is solely to maintain the image of their marriage.
Eloise watches him, wondering if his words were meant as a warning regarding her social behavior.
Narrative panels detail Ian Claude's status as the Emperor's brother and the political pressure from imperialist factions.
Eloise is hurt by his harsh expression, feeling he expects her to act inappropriately in public.
Eloise resolves to be careful with her meetings to avoid bringing any harm to the duchy.
Ian stares at his tea, thinking about their arrangement until the day of their divorce arrives.
The grand estate stands silent as the first afternoon tea of the weekend ends on an awkward note.
Ian's attitude remains deeply sarcastic, proving he is a difficult student for Eloise's social training.
Back in her chambers, Eloise lies on the bed, relieved he is at least following her lead.
Her frustration boils over with a loud, exasperated "ha" as she wonders if Ian is even paying attention.
Sighing, the Duchess realizes that the task of fixing Ian's personality is an exhausting endeavor.
On the second day, Ian fulfills his obligation by formally escorting Eloise back to the house.
Eloise reflects that the weekend was productive while sitting in the soft light of her room.
Her maid suddenly appears at the door, announcing that Madame Z has already arrived for her appointment.
A week passes, and Eloise reflects on time flying while her maid begins measurements.
Directing her toward the dressing room, the maid confirms Madame Z has everything ready.
Eloise enters with a satisfied smile, confident in her choice of the talented dressmaker.
The maid gleefully anticipates seeing the Duchess try on her new dress with her own eyes.
Madame Z works diligently in the sunlight, adjusting a tailored beige outfit on a mannequin.
Looking serene, Eloise stands among blooming flowers, waiting for the fitting to officially begin. With a determined gaze, Eloise signals they should start, ready to see the final results.
2 exquisite garments are unveiled, featuring a patterned green gown and a deep red dress.
Madame Z bows respectfully, explaining she has meticulously adopted the garments to fit Eloise's measurements.
The designer showcases the delicate pearl embellishments and rose detailing added to the crimson dress.
Madame Z details the figure-enhancing modifications while a focused Eloise watches her move about.
Surprised by the designer's claims, Eloise reacts with a curious look and a questioning,
Touched by the design, Eloise admits the rose-adorned gown is perfectly suited to her taste. Madame Z beams with pride as Eloise praises the unique, heartfelt effort put into the piece.
Reaching for a hidden item, Madame Z announces she has one more special surprise to reveal. The Duchess stares in wonder as Madame Z presents a shimmering, magically infused, multicolored orb.
Madame Z explains the magical artifact will serve as the final, breathtaking embellishment for the dress.
Magic ripples through the room as the orb's power makes the crimson gown glow brilliantly.
Eloise is stunned as Madame Z declares the shimmering, enchanted result her ultimate masterpiece. Bursting with excitement, the designer urges the Duchess to finally try on the magical creation.
Eloise looks absolutely radiant as she steps out, the rose-themed gown sparkling with every movement.
Admiring her reflection, the Duchess notes the dress's supreme elegance is perfect for royal company.
Madame Z's intense vow to make the world's best dress leaves Eloise feeling slightly overwhelmed.
A sudden realization strikes Eloise, causing her to pause as she remembers an upcoming engagement. Madame Z suggests debuting the gown at Duchess Berluz's highly anticipated seasonal party. The scene shifts to a lavish banquet table, illustrating the grand scale of the upcoming event.
Duchess loses immense social power and the royal caliber prestige of her famous parties. Madame Z notes the upcoming wedding anniversary makes this party the biggest social event of the year.
With excitement, Madame Z reveals rumors that the princess herself intends to attend the festivities.
Alois's interest is piqued by the mention of the princess, a vital figure in the empire.
Panels explain the princess's royal lineage, her status as Ian's half-sister, and her political standing.
Reflecting on the original story, Eloise recognizes the princess as a major player in the future.
Memories depict the princess as a sharp antagonist who will eventually clash with Diana's interests.
Eloise feels a wave of anxiety while Madame Z asks if she will attend the party. Resolving to act differently than her predecessor, Eloise prepares to face the social challenge head-on.
Smiling, Eloise confirms her attendance, viewing the event as a strategic investment for future alliances.
Madame Z vows to make even more adjustments, much to the Duchess's slight surprised concern. Fueled by ambition, Madame Z declares Eloise will stand out above all others at the party. Narration emphasizes Eloise's hidden goal, using the grand event to launch Madame Z into fame.
Seated in her study wearing her new green gown, Eloise reviews the schedule for next weekend.
A shadow of worry crosses the Duchess's face as she identifies a potential social obstacle. Walking through the corridor, Eloise remains deep in thought, unaware of her immediate surroundings. The Grand Duke suddenly appears, surprising Eloise as she ponders her plans for the social season.
Eloise offers a polite greeting, but Ian Cloud responds with his characteristic, blunt, and brief manner.
The silver-haired Duke stares at her with an intense, unreadable expression that demands her attention. Eloise feels scrutinized by his unblinking gaze, wondering what he is thinking about her appearance.
Presenting her new look, Eloise asks for his opinion on her casual green and white outfit.
Alois's frustration boils over as Ian fails to offer any of the polite words she taught him.
Seething internally, the Duchess demands he share his thoughts while mourning his total lack of romance.
After a long pause, Ian finally speaks, describing her outfit literally as just a calm green.
Chibi Eloise is absolutely appalled by Ian Claude's literal and unromantic description of her outfit.
The Duchess lectures Ian, insisting he should offer genuine compliments, like calling her beautiful.
Ian Claude turns serious, indicating he has something important he needs to discuss with her.
Eloise reveals her plan to attend Duchess Berluse's grand party, much to Ian's indifference.
Looking radiant in her new gown, Eloise glows with confidence and renewed social ambition. Ian Claude is visibly taken aback when Eloise suggests he accompany her to the event. The silver-haired Duke questions if she truly expects him to join her at the party.
Eloise clasps her hands together, beaming as she confirms her desire for his formal company.
Ian's face clouds with suspicion as he asks for the reason behind her sudden request. Eloise playfully reminds him that attending social events is a vital part of his husbandly training.
Narrations explain that Eloise's primary objective is to strategically revamp her public image through social appearances.
Eloise reflects that showing marital harmony in public is the best way to silence nasty rumors. She reminds Ian Claude of his prior promise to learn how to be a proper husband. Ian Claude groans in frustration, refusing to change his schedule without knowing the exact details.
Alois's chibi self seethes with annoyance at the thought of Ian prioritizing another business meeting.
Eloise cheerfully points out the event is next Sunday, leaving him no room to decline.
Internally seething, Eloise laments Ian's stubborn refusal to give her a straightforward and helpful answer. A fierce tiger spirit manifests behind a seething Eloise as she vows to protect Diana.
Eloise suggests replacing their usual weekend training session with their joint attendance at the seasonal party.
Ian Claude looks utterly weary, prompting Eloise to wonder what is bothering the Duke now.
When Eloise mentions a jeweler, Ian notes her recent excessive spending on dresses and accessories.
Eloise expresses her desire for matching brooches to showcase their grace as a united couple.
Resting his chin on his hand, Ian questions the necessity of wearing matching jewelry items.
Leaning in with a mischievous grin, Eloise bluntly states her primary intention is to show off.
Eloise gleefully explains that being seen together is the ultimate way to display their status.
Narrative panels describe how Ian and Eloise previously viewed social symbols as nothing more than bothersome.
Diana is depicted as flustered and hurt by Ian's future coldness in the original story.
A magnificent blue gemstone brooch is highlighted as a rejected gift from the original narrative.
Ian Claude's past self is shown coldly rejecting the idea of wearing matching social accessories.
Eloise clenches her fist, determined to change the outcome of Diana's future heartache and rejection.
Eloise reveals she bought 10 matching brooches, determined to ensure Ian Cloud finally wears one.
Driven by her protective instincts, Eloise resolves to keep Diana from being hurt by Ian. Eloise finalizes the appointment for Thursday while Ian Claude grudgingly accepts the planned schedule.
The Duchess prepares to leave the corridor, but Ian stops her with a sudden call.
Eloise turns back with a questioning look, wondering what else the silver-haired man could want.
She stands tall in her elegant gown, waiting for Ian Claude to finally speak his mind.
Ian closes his eyes, seemingly reflecting on the rapport-building lessons she has been teaching him.
A faint memory of Eloise's lecture on giving romantic compliments flickers through Ian's mind.
Ian Claude claims he has finally given her the answer she wanted, looking surprisingly calm.
As Ian walks away, a bewildered Eloise follows, trying to decipher his strange new behavior. Eloise smiles awkwardly, unsure if Ian's cryptic remark was meant as a compliment or insult.
Rain pours over the grand estate on Thursday, signaling the arrival of the jeweler's appointment. Dressed in elegant black lace, Eloise is caught off guard by Ian's sudden, punctual presence. Ian Claude greets her politely, robotically commenting on her sleep and the supposedly nice weather.
Watching the storm outside, Eloise realizes Ian is practicing her social lessons far too literally.
Despite his awkwardness, Eloise considers his attempt at small talk a sign of significant progress.
Eloise beams as she invites Ian Claude to hold her hand and escort her downstairs.
Ian pauses with a nervous expression, hesitating for a moment before following her social cue.
The Duke finally takes her hand, and they descend the grand staircase together in harmony. A man bows respectfully, greeting the high-ranking couple as they arrive for their jewelry consultation.
Eloise smiles warmly at the kneeling jeweler, graciously granting him permission to stand.
The Duchess inquires if the jeweler has prepared the specific matching brooches she previously requested.
The jeweler presents a lavish collection of matching necklaces, bracelets, and rings for their inspection. Chibi Eloise is wide-eyed and impressed by the overwhelming variety of the jeweler's extensive collection. Ian Claude offers a sharp, cold rejection to every piece presented, much to Eloise's frustration.
The silver-haired Duke remains stoic and unmoving, clearly finding the entire jewelry consultation quite tedious.
Ian maintains his indifferent posture, crossing his arms while refusing to engage with the displays.
Seething internally, Eloise imagines a tray crashing whenever Ian offers his blunt one-word responses.
Fighting for composure, Eloise attempts to draw Ian's interest to a necklace with a unique cut.
Ian dismisses the piece, coldly noting the style was merely a passing trend from last year.
Eloise suggests a floral pattern bracelet, but Ian critiques the design for looking like light patterns.
The Duchess struggles to remain calm while urging Ian to finally pick a matching item. Eloise reminds herself that the jeweler's primary role is to witness and spread rumors of harmony.
Narration reveals that the jeweler serves as a social megaphone to broadcast their relationship to others.
Eloise considers how the jeweler's gossip will strategically improve their standing among the high-ranking nobility. Determined, the Duchess clenches her fist, vowing to use the jeweler's influence for her hidden plans.
Eloise beams as she presents another brooch, playfully trying to coax a positive reaction from Ian.
Ian Claude looks puzzled, clearly taken aback by Eloise's sudden and persistent enthusiasm for the jewelry.
Eloise visualizes a more charming Ian, resolving to mold him into a man others would desire.
A memory of a joyful, pink-haired Diana serves as a reminder of the future Eloise protects.
Eloise resolves to fix Ian's reputation to prevent his future divorce and vague romantic entanglements.
When Ian questions her interest, Eloise confirms the current piece is her favorite among the collection. Eloise explains the brooch will match her red dress and beautifully complement Ian's striking purple eyes. Chibi Eloise is deeply annoyed by Ian's soulless and unenthusiastic agreement to her thoughtful selection. Turning to the Duke, Eloise asks him to look at her, preparing for a social maneuver. Ian looks on with surprise as Eloise holds up a shimmering, purple heart-shaped brooch for him. A soft glow surrounds Eloise as she carefully pins the beautiful heart brooch onto Ian's shirt.
The jeweler praises the choice, explaining the heart shape symbolizes the deep sharing of lovers' hearts.
Internally, a furious Eloise rejects the romantic sentiment while struggling to maintain a polite facial expression. Handing the matching piece to Ian, Eloise asks if he understands why she is giving it. Ian Claude is stunned when Eloise demands that he be the one to pin it on. Eloise playfully suggests that if Ian won't do it, she will simply ask the jeweler instead.
Leaning in, Eloise whispers a sharp reminder for Ian to say something romantic during the task.
Ian hesitates, visibly uncomfortable with the request to perform such an intimate social gesture right now. The silver-haired Duke leans in close, carefully pinning the heart-shaped jewelry onto the Duchess's dress. Eloise smiles triumphantly, showcasing the elegant heart brooch now resting perfectly against her black lace.
The couple stands together in the grand hall, presenting a flawless image of marital bliss and harmony.
Ian Claude exhales a weary breath, clearly exhausted by the social performance Eloise forced him into.
Eloise proudly declares herself more beautiful than the brooch, challenging Ian to finally give a compliment.
Ian stands frozen and blushing, seemingly overwhelmed by a sudden realization of the Duchess's radiant beauty. Noticing his dazed state, Eloise checks on the Duke while he remains lost in his thoughts.
Eloise confidently dismisses his silence as a simple acknowledgement of the factual truth of her beauty.
Ian remains utterly speechless, leaving the jeweler shocked by the Duke's sudden and intense romantic daze. The jeweler offers to pack the remaining set as Eloise gives firm instructions for the purchase. Seeking an upsell, the jeweler suggests an additional service to infuse the brooches with a scent.
Eloise considers the idea, noting that lovers who share the same scent are said to be closer.
The jeweler warns that the cost is high, but Eloise remains thoughtful about the investment's value.
Beaming, Eloise agrees to the scent infusion, while Ian watches her with a quiet, observant expression. The scene shifts to a sunny garden where the couple shares a quiet and elegant tea. Ian Claude notes that Eloise seemed to genuinely enjoy the brooches during their earlier jewelry consultation. Eloise drinks her tea, reflecting that she is more satisfied with her plan's progress than the jewelry itself. Ian Claude sits across from her with his arms crossed, his expression still showing clear signs of annoyance.
Ian questions the significance of wearing matching items, claiming that mere accessories cannot redefine a relationship's true nature.
Eloise worries that if Ian doesn't change his cold attitude, he will treat the future Diana with similar indifference. When Eloise asks about his missing wedding ring, Ian bluntly dismisses the item as being both annoying and unagreed upon.
The silver-haired Duke looks completely taken aback when Eloise focuses her pointed questions about jewelry directly at him.
Eloise lets out a heavy sigh, realizing she may have set her expectations for Ian's behavior far too high.
Topping the table, Eloise questions why lovers or friends share accessories if such things are as meaningless as Ian claims.
Ian remains silent and brooding, seemingly contemplating the Duchess's logical challenge regarding the emotional value of shared symbols.
Eloise looks off into the distance, her expression focused as she continues to lead the conversation during their tea.
In the sunny garden, Ian breaks his silence to ask Eloise what she truly means by her previous statement.
Eloise explains that people use visible objects to represent connections when they feel insecure about things they cannot see.
Looking at her with interest, Ian asks if that insecurity is the reason she suggested the matching jewelry to him.
Eloise laughs with mock frustration, clarifying that their own situation is quite different from a couple in love.
Ian turns his gaze away as the Duchess bluntly reminds him that they do not actually love one another.
Tuck. Eloise places the brooch on the table, stating it is merely a symbol to show off to others. Ian accepts her reasoning for now, while Eloise privately considers his future and the woman he might truly care for.
As they finish their time together, Ian stands tall beside the sitting Duchess in the light-filled garden setting.
The scene shifts to Ian's darkened office where he sits alone at a massive desk covered in paperwork. Dokak! Ian opens a small black jewelry box on his desk, his attention momentarily diverted from his official duties.
A faded image of Eloise drinking tea appears, representing Ian's lingering thoughts about her recent advice and future predictions. Holding the purple heart brooch, Ian wonders exactly when his wife began to change into such an assertive person.
Ian recalls a vision of a confident and beautiful Eloise, noting she was never this assertive or annoying before. Ian sighs while holding the brooch, repeating her words about matters of the heart with a skeptical tone. Looking down at the jewelry, the silver-haired Duke dismisses the entire concept of love as nothing more than nonsense.
Tuck! Ian shuts the box as someone knocks, prompting him to call out for his visitor to enter.
Kyle Elzire, the red-haired aide, enters the room with a massive stack of documents for the Duke's review.
Ian remains at his desk and coldly informs Kyle that he is exactly 10 minutes late for their meeting. Kyle is stunned to catch his master looking at jewelry instead of the usual documents on his desk. Pointing a finger, Kyle loudly exclaims that he saw the jewelry, much to the Duke's visible irritation.
Kyle teases Ian for daydreaming, noting it's unusual for the man who normally hates wasting even a single minute.
Ian's anger flares as Kyle asks if he is trying to win back the Duchess's heart with jewelry.
Tuck! A loud sound of impact echoes through the estate as Ian delivers a physical correction to his aide.
Rubbing his head, a pained Kyle apologizes while complaining that the Duke's punch was far too strong. Kyle laments that a swordmaster's strike is fatal to a civilian, but Ian tells him to stop talking.
Kyle leans over the desk, asking for confirmation if the item he saw was truly a piece of jewelry.
Slamming his hands down, Kyle is shocked to confirm that Ian bought the jewelry specifically for the Grand Duchess.
Ian stares down at his paperwork, sternly addressing his aide by his full name, Kyle Elzire, to restore order.
Kyle sweat drops while cautiously asking his master if he is actually planning to give the gift to her.
Ian points out the box, clarifying that the Grand Duchess was actually the one who gave it to him first.
Kyle is utterly speechless, standing frozen as a background of shocked bunnies reflects his total disbelief at the news.
Kyle desperately asks what happened between the couple, but Ian stoically maintains that absolutely nothing has occurred.
Not believing a word of it, Kyle points out how unusual it is for the Duchess to give jewelry.
Kyle smugly wonders if his previous advice was helpful, only for Ian to tell him he's overestimating himself.
Ian seethes with a dark aura, crumpling the document in his hands while Kyle watches with a nervous smile.
Kyle quickly retreats toward the door while asking when the Duke finally intends to wear the brooch.
Ian focuses back on his writing, noting that his red-haired aide seems particularly full of questions today.
A flashback depicts Ian taking Eloise's hand as she requests his company for a party at the Berluz Duchy.
Kyle looks completely bewildered, wondering if the couple has taken some strange medicine during his absence. Chibi Kyle offers a final apology as Ian looms over the desk with a visible vein of anger popping. Kyle praises the Grand Duchess's generosity, but a skeptical Ian questions if her behavior truly counts as effort. Kyle encourages his master to reciprocate her efforts, hoping it might finally bring the distant couple closer together.
A firm "to-talk" sounds as the Duke abruptly shuts the jewelry box, clearly unswayed by his aide's romantic advice.
Ian Claude recalls a time when the Duchess was far simpler and easier to manage than her current assertive self.
Looking away, Ian Claude firmly dismisses the idea of their relationship ever evolving into something genuinely intimate. Time passes quickly, and the day finally arrives for the grand seasonal party at the Berluz Duchy.
Preparing for the gala, Eloise decides to wear a matching rose scent as she calls for her maid, Bibi.
Amidst a flurry of excitement, Bibi and the staff look on in awe at the Duchess's stunning preparations.
Bibi compares Eloise to a descended angel, but the Duchess humbly rejects the praise with a knowing smile. While Bibi insists Eloise is the loveliest, the Duchess privately anticipates the day Diana will rightfully take her place. Eloise bids her maid farewell, heading out to the party with the goal of protecting her sister's future.
Eloise pauses at the top of the grand staircase, spotting Ian waiting for her below in a striking white suit.
Stunned by the sight before her, Eloise finds herself momentarily breathless at the Duke's surprisingly handsome appearance.
Eloise marvels at how effortlessly Ian pulls off the white ensemble, noting that his handsome face truly completes the look.
Dressed in pristine white and blue, the Duke presents a picture of cold, aristocratic perfection as he waits to depart.
Breaking the silence, Ian Claude bluntly asks if Eloise plans on standing there all day instead of joining him.
Ian's sharp remark about her vanity earns him a silent glare as Eloise forces a polite smile and dissents.
Joining him at the bottom, Eloise asks with feigned sweetness if the Duke has been waiting for her long. Ian checks his watch and coldly informs her she is exactly 10 minutes late, much to her internal annoyance. Seething with rage, Eloise mentally berates Ian for his lack of social grace and his overly literal, ungentlemanly response. Eloise thinks Ian would be a lonely old man without his looks, while the Duke remains oblivious to her frustration. Masking her irritation, Eloise internally notes that a proper gentleman would have simply lied and said he hadn't waited long. The couple bickers over the concept of white lies, with Ian remaining stubbornly logical while Eloise pleads for basic consideration. Giving up on his personality, Eloise decides she no longer cares to understand the Duke's difficult and unyielding nature. Eloise firmly instructs Ian on how to behave in the future, demanding he show more consideration for a lady's feelings.
A rhythmic tock-tock echoes through the streets as the ducal carriage finally departs for the social event of the season.
A heavy silence fills the carriage as the couple sits opposite one another, both lost in their own conflicting thoughts.
Feeling incredibly bored, Eloise resolves to fix Ian's reputation before Diana eventually returns to claim her rightful place. To her disbelief, the Duke seems to have fallen asleep, seemingly unbothered by the gravity of their impending social debut.
Eloise lets out a weary sigh, reminding herself that molding Ian into a desirable husband will require many small steps.
Watching her reflection, Eloise mentally prepares for her grand re-debut into the high society she once successfully avoided.
She vows to secure her social standing now, ensuring a smooth path for Diana to walk in the future.
Noticing her intense gaze, Ian Claude snaps back to attention and asks what is troubling the Duchess this time. Eloise asks if Ian has ever attended a Berluz party before, seeking to understand his past social experiences. Ian recalls attending once as a prince, reminding Eloise of his former royal status and his natural social pedigree.
A fleeting memory of a woman in a simple green dress highlights the dramatic change in Eloise's current lifestyle.
Eloise reflects on how much her life has changed, noting she hasn't attended a single event since their wedding day.
Ian Claude dismissively tells her to simply continue as she has, reminding her of their separate and individual goals.
Eloise is frustrated by Ian's refusal to go beyond his basic duties, and he coldly confirms his limited cooperation. Undeterred, the Duchess demands that he at least escort her politely to the entrance for the sake of appearances.
The Duke stares at her with his cold purple eyes, silently weighing her demand for a more convincing social performance. Ian agrees that putting on a small show of unity will ultimately be less of a hassle for everyone involved. Eloise explains that even a brief public appearance together will manipulate the crowd's perception of their troubled marriage.
With a weary sigh, the Duke gives his final consent to the Duchess's plan for their shared entrance.
Eloise seethes at Ian's continued lack of empty, polite gestures, finding his blunt honesty increasingly difficult to tolerate.
The carriage pulls up to the magnificent Berluz mansion, where a grand welcome awaits the high-ranking ducal couple.
Observing the guard's crisp salute, Eloise notes the immense power and respect that the ducal crest still commands. A bittersweet feeling washes over Eloise as she realizes this royal treatment should rightfully belong to her sister, Diana.
Ian Claude questions her intense gaze, while Eloise battles the urge to strike him for being such a difficult husband. Eloise mentally threatens to strike Ian once their divorce is finally realized. The couple makes a grand entrance, radiating an aura of high society perfection. Shocked whispers ripple through the crowd as guests witness the couple's arrival.
A satisfied Eloise notes that their matching brooches are working exactly as planned.
Ian Claude whispers a reminder for the Duchess to remain courteous and kind.
They arrive at the glass greenhouse ready to perform their roles for the elite.
Rhythmic footsteps sound as the couple walks across the elegant estate grounds. Eloise maintains a polite smile while the Duke remains as stoic as ever.
A close-up reveals the Duke is indeed wearing the brooch Eloise gifted him. Eloise defines social gatherings as a place for meeting new people, which Ian confirms. Ian asks if this specific party meets her criteria for a productive social outing. The scene shifts to the other noble guests enjoying the garden party atmosphere. Ian observes that this social event seems different from Eloise's usual goals.
Frustrated, the Duchess accuses him of cutting out the necessary context of their conversation.
Narration explains that business matters are better suited for formal imperial banquets. Eloise wonders if Ian's remark was a subtle jab at her choice of venue. Chibi Eloise insists she has personal business to attend to with a specific guest. Ian comes to a sudden halt, reacting with surprise to her unexpected admission.
Dark energy swirls around Ian Claude as he asks who she must meet.
Eloise confirms that meeting this mysterious person was her primary goal for the day.
A silhouette of a villainous woman with a crown looms in her memory.
Eloise vows to find her target, while Ian questions her previous lack of interest. The Duchess is genuinely puzzled by Ian's sudden and uncharacteristic line of questioning. Ian asks if anyone else has managed to catch her eye in his absence. Eloise is left reeling, wondering what has gotten into her usually indifferent husband.
She wonders why the Duke is suddenly showing such intense interest in her.
Eloise joyfully explains she has wanted to meet this person since before her transmigration.
Ian stops walking again, his silence creating a heavy, tense atmosphere between them. Eloise wonders if being honest about her target's identity is the right move. Recalling Ian's blood relation to the princess, Eloise decides to keep her motives hidden. Laughing nervously, the Duchess promises to explain the full details at a later time.
The couple pauses amidst the flowers as other nobles pass by them in the distance.
Ian takes her hand, prompting Eloise to wonder why he isn't letting go.
The Duke lowers his head, pressing an uncharacteristically tender kiss to her hand.
Eloise is struck speechless, her world spinning from the shock of his public affection.
Blushing and sweating, the Duchess struggles to process what the Duke just did.
With an intense gaze, Ian tells her to have a good time at the party.
He turns and walks away, leaving a dazed Eloise alone in the garden. Standing frozen, the Duchess is left wondering what has happened to her husband. Sipping red wine, Eloise questions if Ian ate something strange to act so differently.
She trembles, dismissing his kiss as more of a cold stamp than a romantic gesture. Eloise decides to focus on the crowd, intending to observe the party's atmosphere. Groups of judgmental noblewomen watch the Duchess, ready to pounce with their gossip. A sharp sound of heels echoes as Eloise prepares for her first social confrontation.
Isabella Howard, the brown-haired second daughter of the Marquis, introduces herself with a smile.
Eloise pauses, recognizing the name as belonging to a major antagonist from the novel.
Flashbacks depict Isabella as a recurring socialite who constantly tormented the young Diana. Eloise recalls Isabella's unrequited love for Ian and her subsequent resentment toward Diana.
A memory of Isabella ruining Diana's dress with wine fills Eloise with cold fury.
The Duchess seized with rage, remembering how much Isabella upset her beloved sister. Isabella Howard approaches Eloise with a fake smile, offering a polite greeting to the Grand Duchess.
Suspicious of the sudden friendliness, Eloise wonders what the brown-haired woman is truly plotting. Isabella laughs as she comments on how difficult it has been to see the Duchess lately.
Other noblewomen join the group, noting that Eloise hasn't attended a party in nearly a year.
Eloise remains stoic as she realizes the surrounding women are gathering just to mock her.
The freckled woman with the fan remarks that the Duchess is a difficult person to meet.
Behind her back, the ladies whisper about the Duchess's supposedly expensive and prideful face. Eloise stands in shocked silence as the weight of their blatant disrespect finally sinks in.
Sipping her wine, Eloise reflects on how real the world of the novel has become.
Isabella asks with a pointed smirk if the Grand Duke bothered to attend with her.
The black-haired lady and the woman with the fan mock the couple's cold relationship.
A close-up of Eloise's eye captures her growing irritation as she listens to their insults. Isabella is surrounded by shadowed figures as she leads the verbal assault against the Duchess.
The socialites laugh, claiming they would be too embarrassed to stay after being ignored.
Her hand tightens on her dress as the sound of a quick, firm talk echoes her rage. Overhearing an insult about Diana, Eloise reaches the absolute limit of her patience.
Masking her rage, Eloise puts on a bright, joyful expression to begin her counteroffensive.
Chibi versions of the noblewomen stare in pure confusion at the Duchess's sudden change of heart. A sharp click of heels echoes through the air as Eloise takes a deliberate step forward.
Laughing, the Duchess claims she wishes she had met with them even sooner. Eloise blushes and acts shyly, admitting she felt a bit embarrassed earlier in the evening.
Isabella is confused, wondering why the high-ranking Duchess would feel any sense of embarrassment.
Eloise explains that Ian insisted on escorting her personally despite his busy schedule.
She continues her act, sighing about how the Duke made a fuss in front of others.
Lady Howard stammers in disbelief as her attempt to humiliate Eloise completely backfires. A triumphant smirk plays on Eloise's lips as she enjoys the success of her manipulation.
Eloise notes that she couldn't possibly refuse her husband's demands as his devoted wife. Isabella stares in stunned silence, unable to process the Duchess's sudden display of marital bliss.
Eloise mentally mocks Isabella for using such old-fashioned tactics to pick a fight. The Duchess strikes back, mentioning she heard Lady Howard is still waiting for marriage proposals.
Eloise reflects on the skills she honed as a dedicated fan of a minor character.
With a sharp smile, the Duchess asks if she accidentally misspoke about Isabella's situation. Bringing up Isabella's secret crush, Eloise watches the brown-haired woman's composure crumble.
Eloise playfully asks if it would be rude to reveal the identity of Isabella's target.
A visible anger symbol appears as Isabella's hand shakes with humiliated rage.
Eloise mocks Lady Howard for worrying about others while her own love life remains unrequited.
Nearby guests are left speechless as the heated confrontation unfolds in the garden.
The Duchess explains her specialized knowledge of how to truly get under someone's skin.
Isabella stands mortified and trembling, her face flushed with a mix of shame and rage.
A frustrated jisk escapes Isabella as she stands before a background of dark, swirling energy.
Shadowed figures of other ladies giggle as Isabella is publicly humiliated by the Duchess.
Eloise coldly notes that those who attack others should be prepared for the consequences. A focus on the bottom of the Duchess's floral dress as she prepares her final move. Eloise suddenly grabs Isabella's hands, mockingly offering to help her with her unrequited love. Terrified, the brown-haired lady stammers and tries to pull away from Eloise's iron grasp.
The Duchess's eyes sparkle as she asks who Isabella currently has feelings for.
A vision of Diana appears as Eloise recalls the moment Isabella's defeat was sealed.
She continues to squeeze Isabella's hands, warning how troublesome it is to love someone taken.
Ian's back is shown as Eloise questions why anyone would chase a married man. A sharp "tuck" sounds as Eloise delivers her final, cutting remark to the defeated Isabella. Isabella rejects the offer, feeling burdened by the Grand Duchess's mocking display of kindness. Snapping with annoyance, the brown-haired lady tells Eloise her marriage is none of her concern. Eloise insists it is merely gratitude, but Isabella demands she stop meddling in her affairs. The atmosphere darkens as Eloise leans in, asking Isabella if she truly understands her position.
Isabella is struck with confusion, sweating as she wonders what the Duchess truly means.
Eloise turns Isabella's own words against her, highlighting the hypocrisy of her earlier behavior.
A quick, sharp "talk" sounds as Isabella flinches, her composure breaking under Eloise's intense gaze. Masking her intimidation with a bright smile, Eloise worries that others might misunderstand their interaction. The other socialites, including Lady Harrison and Countess Edward, watch the tense confrontation in silence. Eloise mentally mocks their lack of pride, urging them to use their words more effectively. A close-up of the Duchess's green eyes captures her cold determination to crush her opposition.
Eloise stands tall among the shivering noblewomen, her presence dominating the elegant garden party atmosphere.
With a cold look, the Duchess reminds them that showing excessive interest in others is rude.
Eloise silences Countess Edward by mentioning her son's recent suspension from the Academy for misbehavior.
Lady Harrison recoils as Eloise brings up the Viscount's secret gambling trips to the casino.
The Duchess concludes that every noble has skeletons in their closet, labeling their behavior crass.
Eloise asks if she should inquire about everyone else's well-being and hidden secrets next.
Surrounded by a dark aura, Isabella trembles in shame, desperately trying to end the conversation. Isabella offers a mortified apology for her rudeness, her golden eyes filled with humiliated tears.
Eloise immediately reverts to a joyful expression, claiming Isabella's kindness could easily be misunderstood. The Duchess mockingly invites Isabella to her residence, leaving the brown-haired lady seething with rage.
Isabella flees the greenhouse as her companions call out after her in total shock.
The other noblewomen beat a hasty retreat, while a chibi Eloise celebrates their public defeat. Watching them leave, Eloise reflects that those without wit shouldn't bother mocking others.
A sudden, amused pfft sounds as a blonde-haired woman watches the scene with laughter. Eloise turns in surprise, noticing the new arrival standing amidst the flowers of the greenhouse.
The blonde lady laughs heartily, declaring the previous confrontation was absolutely hilarious to witness.
With a sparkling aura, she praises the Grand Duchess for being such an entertaining person.
Narration identifies the newcomer as the high-ranking and influential Princess Louisa.
Princess Louisa's elegant white and blue dress is shown in detail as she enjoys the drama.
Eloise bows as the crowd formally greets the second son of the Empire, Princess Louisa.
The princess dismisses the formality, accepting a drink while Eloise watches her with nervous caution.
Eloise nervously identifies the princess as a walking bomb who is difficult to manage socially. Recalling Louisa's reputation, Eloise labels her an equal opportunity lunatic who has victimized many nobles. Princess Louisa greets the Grand Duchess, noting it has been a long time since they met.
Sipping her drink, Louisa admits the party was boring until Eloise dropped a social bomb.
Eloise keeps a polite, sweating smile, feeling the pressure of the princess's uncharacteristic attention.
Louisa laughs, explaining that the noise of the confrontation was what drew her over.
The princess asks what brought the reclusive Grand Duchess to such a public social gathering.
Chibi versions of the pair joke that Eloise's face is more valuable than the royal family's.
Eloise laughs, explaining she simply felt it was her duty as Duchess to attend parties.
Louisa's smile remains playful yet skeptical as she processes the Duchess's sudden change in behavior.
The blonde princess notes that the Grand Duchess seems like an entirely different person today.
Eloise is struck by the princess's sharp insight, wondering if she is being too observant.
Louisa brushes it off as a figure of speech, claiming no one else is like Eloise.
Chibi Eloise is insulted as the princess labels her and the Grand Duke as boring. Princess Louisa laughs, tying the Duke and Duchess for first place in being empire-wide bores.
Not thrilled by the comparison, Eloise forces a laugh while mentally distancing herself from Ian.
Louisa admits she saw something new, surprised to see the Duchess openly embarrass a guest.
Despite the princess's chaos, Eloise notes that her social counteroffensive has had a successful start.
Eloise tells the princess she didn't intend to embarrass anyone, but is glad Louisa was amused.
Louisa laughs, noting that the Duchess seems like an entirely different and less stiff person now.
The blonde princess beams with joy, finding the sudden shift in social atmosphere absolutely delightful. Eloise feels relieved, realizing that capturing the princess's genuine interest is a significant social victory.
She mentally notes that gaining Louisa as an ally will remove many obstacles for Diana's future.
Eloise compliments the princess's dress, asking if she was personally involved in directing the tailor's design.
Louisa is impressed by the Duchess's sharp eye, proudly showing off her blue and white gown. Pointing to her hem, the princess asks if her dress's unique design reminds Eloise of anything.
Eloise pauses thoughtfully, using her knowledge of the original story to identify the dress's hidden theme.
With a bright smile, she correctly guesses that the dress represents the powerful waves of the ocean.
Eloise remembers how the princess used this very topic to lecture others in the original story.
Eloise correctly identifies the southern cliffs as the source, causing the princess to gasp in utter surprise.
Louisa excitedly confirms the Etienne region inspired her, thrilled that someone finally understood her creative vision.
Eloise smiles while privately recalling how the princess once held Diana hostage for 3 pages over this.
The princess finds it suspicious that the previously uninterested Duchess is now so observant and accurate.
Maintaining her grace, Eloise adjusts her floral dress and explains that interests naturally evolve over time.
Louisa examines the Duchess's striking red dress, admitting she has never seen a design quite like it.
Eloise explains that the long decorations are magic stones that glow brilliantly when the lights are low.
The princess hums in deep thought, clearly intrigued by the Duchess's sophisticated and magical fashion choice.
Louisa asks who the tailor is as Eloise recalls Madame Zed's intense focus during their fitting. Eloise credits Madame Zed Salome, noting the princess once forced the talented tailor into her job.
The princess is puzzled by the name, and Eloise explains she is a recent personal hire.
Eloise laughs as she watches the princess's reaction, while Louisa seems slightly annoyed by the mystery.
Pouting, Louisa grumbles about how such a talented tailor could remain a secret for so long.
Eloise identifies the tailor as Diana's, while Louisa wonders why she had never heard of her before. Princess Louisa continues to cross her arms, her golden eyes narrowed in a playful yet stubborn pout. Eloise graciously offers to introduce Madame Zed, suggesting the tailor could create special pieces for the princess.
Louisa's eyes widen with excitement at the prospect of owning a custom magic-infused gown.
Confirming the offer, Eloise enjoys her successful maneuvering, while Louisa reacts with pure, sparkling delight. Louisa blushes with joy, unable to hide her smug happiness at the promise of a new tailor.
Eagerly, the princess accepts the proposal, her earlier skepticism completely replaced by fashionable anticipation and excitement.
Louisa agrees she can't refuse the offer, and Eloise accepts the interaction with a smile.
Eloise thinks about how easy the encounter was as she asks the princess to inform her of availability. Princess Louisa identifies a newcomer, and Eloise is surprised as the host woman walks past them. A close-up of the host woman captures her refined beauty and welcoming smile as she joins them. Louisa formally recognizes the black-haired woman as the Duchess of Bruges, the party's host.
Narration highlights the grandeur of the Bruges family's social events and their prestige within the empire.
A wide view of the opulent garden party shows guests enjoying the festivities in the greenhouse. Text explains that only those with truly urgent matters typically get to speak with the host personally.
The Duchess of Bruges asks Louisa how she has been as Eloise observes their meeting.
Louisa notes they met only a week ago, finding the host's polite inquiry a bit strange. The host maintains her pleasant demeanor, stating there is no harm in frequent and friendly check-ins.
Louisa warns her not to start nagging, while chibi versions highlight their contrasting personalities and roles.
Narration reveals the Emperor personally tasked the Duchess of Bruges with the princess's education and discipline. Despite her calm exterior, the host is described as a very firm person responsible for teaching Louisa.
The Duchess of Bruges hopes the refreshments are satisfactory, and Louisa notes the food's improving quality.
Narration notes the meticulous eyes of a teacher who takes her professional responsibilities very seriously. Louisa enjoys her drink while Eloise reflects on the host's competence and remarkably strict educational methods. A sweating chibi Eloise wonders if the princess is truly only 14 years old. The Duchess of Bruges promises to correct a minor issue as the social gathering continues in the garden. The black-haired host firmly instructs the young Princess Louisa to correct her posture. Louisa strains to lower her chin and fold her hands under the host's meticulous direction. Watching the strict lesson from a distance, the brown-haired Eloise stands stunned by the scene. The Duchess of Bruges praises the princess's improved stance, leaving the blonde girl slightly annoyed. Louisa complains about the unexpected lesson, but the host calmly explains she's just checking basics. Eloise compares the princess's conditioned reactions to Pavlov's dog while the girl continues to pout. A rhythmic step-step sounds as the host leaves the princess and approaches the Grand Duchess. The elegant host formally greets Princess Louisa before turning her full attention toward Eloise. Eloise reminds herself that this prestigious anniversary celebration is a high-stakes social environment. The host expresses her gratitude while Louisa offers a mortified apology for lacking a gift. Despite her polite words, the host's intense gaze makes her appear as predatory as a tiger. Eloise attempts to yield the floor, but the black-haired woman insists she stay. The Duchess of Bruges clarifies that her current business is solely with the Grand Duchess. Feeling the sudden weight of the host's intense focus, a chibi Eloise trembles in fear. Eloise maintains a graceful facade while sweating under the pressure of the host's piercing eyes.
The Grand Duchess wonders why such a powerful figure would have business with her today.
The host brings up the earlier greenhouse commotion, catching Eloise off guard with her awareness.
In the background, other noblewomen continue to whisper about the rowdy scene Eloise caused. Fearing a public scolding, Eloise resolves to maintain her dignity and hide any internal weakness. Clenching her fist, Eloise mentally prepares for a confrontation with the notoriously firm Duchess. Eloise finds the host's soft, smiling face more terrifying than any overt expression of anger. Attempting to defuse the situation, Eloise begins to offer a preemptive apology for the disturbance.
The black-haired host shocks everyone by stating she came to apologize to the Grand Duchess instead.
To the assembly's astonishment, the Duchess of Preluge performs a deep, humble bow of apology. Eloise is left frozen in utter disbelief as the influential host publicly humbles herself.
Whispers erupt among the gathered nobles as they process the host's unexpected show of deference.
Isabella's former companions watch the scene from a distance, looking increasingly nervous and intimidated.
A triumphant Chibi Luisa notes that she even showed kindness by siding with the Duchess.
By apologizing so publicly, the host effectively silences any potential gossip regarding Eloise's earlier actions. Eloise admires the host's quick-witted maneuver to gracefully end the social drama.
The black-haired host thanks Eloise for preventing her from being placed in an awkward position.
Looking Eloise in the eye, the host compares her to a warm flower of spring. Eloise accepts the host's gracious words while the Duchess modestly brushes off the praise. The host offers her future assistance, signaling the start of a powerful new social alliance.
A small, knowing smile plays on Eloise's lips as she realizes the value of this gain.
Eloise confirms her intent to take up the host's offer of help when the time comes.
The host asks what's on her mind, but Eloise politely declines to discuss it immediately.
Eloise formally expresses her honor while mentally celebrating the successful outcome of the encounter.
As she turns away, Eloise identifies the Duchess as the perfect person to support Diana.
Eloise touches her chin, reflecting on the massive and unexpected social victory she just achieved.
Surrounded by an aura of satisfaction, Eloise mentally cheers for her successful progress on Diana's behalf. Princess Louisa looks on with confusion as Eloise revels in her internal victory.
Eloise radiates a joyful light, clearly pleased with the positive turn of events at the party.
Eloise promises to follow up soon as she prepares to enjoy the rest of the banquet.
Looking around the greenhouse, Eloise takes note of the shift in the guests' perception of her. 3 young noblewomen watch the Grand Duchess with renewed interest and a sense of awe.
Eloise reflects on how gaining the favor of both the princess and the host is incredibly advantageous.
Eloise enjoys a sip of wine until a pair of nervous guests approaches her once again. 2 noblewomen approach cautiously, debating with each other on how to properly address the Grand Duchess.
Eloise smirks at their hesitant approach, noting that they don't seem to have hostile intentions.
Eloise smiles warmly, inviting the hesitant noblewomen to approach and speak their minds freely.
Her attention is caught by the sound of fingers nervously tapping as Lizzie and her friend approach.
Welcoming the interaction, Eloise mentions she is currently without any company to chat with.
Lizzie introduces herself as a count's daughter, making the Duchess think the pair is rather cute.
A blue-haired woman joins them, expressing her deep honor at meeting the famous Grand Duchess.
The women praise Eloise's charisma while criticizing Lady Howard for her habit of picking fights.
Isabella Howard stands alone, looking frustrated that her earlier confrontation yielded no favorable results.
Shifting their focus, the noblewomen begin to admire the stunning beauty of Eloise's red gown.
Looking closely at the dress, they wonder if its shimmering effect comes from hidden jewels. Eloise reveals the sparkle is actually magic dust, leaving the ladies amazed by her fashion choice.
The blue-haired woman notices a beautiful brooch on Eloise's waist, impressing the Duchess with her observation.
Eloise explains she picked the brooch herself and added a fragrance enchantment to enhance it.
The woman recalls the Grand Duke wearing a matching brooch, proving everyone is watching them closely.
Eloise smirks knowingly, realizing the profound impact her coordinated appearance is having on the guests.
Touching her cheek, Eloise blushes slightly as she basks in the success of her social maneuvering.
A chorus of "how romantic" erupts as the girls gush over the Grand Duke's public affection.
Reflecting on her previous isolation, Eloise admits staying cooped up in the mansion was a mistake. Narration notes that the successful evening is rapidly improving both Ian's and Eloise's social reputations.
Eloise thinks about Diana's reputation while noting that Ian is lucky to have her as a partner.
The orange-haired woman wonders if the party will be featured in the mysterious Arya newsletter.
Eloise is caught completely off guard by the mention of a publication she doesn't recognize.
A sweat drop appears as Eloise realizes high society has a weekly gossip rack she never knew existed.
A confused Chibi Eloise wonders if she simply overlooked this detail in her past life.
Narration describes the Arya newsletter as a source that magically gathers and publishes all high society gossip.
The blue-haired woman reveals that the newsletter's author and publication location remain a complete mystery. Curious about the source of the rumors, Eloise asks if anyone knows who writes the articles.
People believe a powerful magician runs the newsletter, which features illustrations of the capital's top stories.
Eloise is stunned to learn subscribers can see real-time reactions to the published gossip articles.
Looking deeply concerned, the Duchess asks for more detail about how the magical newsletter operates.
A separate section of the scroll displays a live comment section for readers to interact. Eloise realizes with a sweat that this world has invented its own version of online comments. Noticing Eloise's intense expression, the orange-haired woman checks to see if everything is all right. With sparkling eyes, Eloise eagerly asks how she can get a subscription to the newsletter. Back at the mansion, Kyle reports to Ian that Eloise successfully handled a clash with Lady Howard. Ian listens intently as Kyle describes how the princess and Duchess Breluge favored his wife.
Kyle adds that the Grand Duchess spent her time exclusively with other noblewomen during the event.
Ian dismisses the report as Kyle teases him for being more interested than he admits. Ian denies any special interest, but Kyle points out his uncharacteristic behavior, like kissing Eloise's hand.
A chibi Ian asks where he got his info as Kyle laughs about his far-reaching influence.
Kyle wonders if Ian's sudden change of heart means he's terminally ill, earning a sharp, irritated glare.
The red-haired aide laughs heartily, clearly finding his lord's developing romantic interest highly entertaining.
A sharp thud sounds as Ian dismisses his aide, claiming the constant teasing is giving him a headache.
Sitting alone in the dim library, the silver-haired Ian remains focused on a document in his hand.
Ian examines a photo of Eloise enjoying herself with other women, confirming she didn't find a replacement.
Reflecting on his skills, Ian admits that while he usually understands motives, Eloise is a confusing exception.
Ian stares at the picture of his smiling wife, lost in thought as the sun begins to set.
Standing up, Ian wonders if his own recent actions are just as pointless as Kyle's reporting. Looking out toward the darkening garden, Ian notes that it's late and Eloise has yet to return.
Ian stands by the window, his expression troubled as he watches the empty path for her carriage.
Deciding he can no longer wait, Ian prepares to head out and confirm the situation for himself.
Ian stands at the base of the stairs as Eloise stumbles into the mansion.
Ian looks completely caught off guard by her unsteady entrance and lets out a gasp.
A flushed and giddy Eloise offers a wide, drunken smile as her world spins.
Ian admits he was worried about her late return, noting her clear enjoyment of the party.
Clutching her head, Eloise admits she might have indulged too much in the party's drinks.
Her balance fails and a sudden stumble sends her falling forward with a startled cry.
Ian reacts instantly, catching Eloise firmly in his arms to prevent a painful fall.
Ian warns her to be careful while a dazed Eloise offers a soft, breathy thanks. Peering up with wide eyes, Eloise finally realizes it is the Grand Duke holding her.
Ian observes her state, dryly remarking that it seems she attended a drinking party instead.
Eloise explains that the ladies preferred alcohol over tea, leading to her current tipsy state.
Ian is genuinely surprised to learn that his wife has such a low alcohol tolerance.
Confused by her referring to herself in the third person, Ian wonders if she is all right.
Ian bluntly declares she is drunk, and Eloise boldly agrees, asking if he can tell.
She recalls the immense effort it took to keep her guard up among the noblewomen. Ian admits his ignorance of her struggle as the quiet mansion hallway stretches behind them.
A bead of sweat rolls down Ian's face as he faces her chaotic and uncharacteristic behavior.
Maintaining a cheerful facade, Eloise insists she really tried her best to stay sober.
From behind, Ian questions the logic of her drinking while trying not to get drunk.
Sighing in defeat, Ian realizes that a drunken person won't provide any sensible answers.
Ian formally extends his hand, offering to escort the swaying Duchess further into the house.
Delighted by the offer, a blushing Eloise excitedly prepares to accept her husband's escort.
Ian stoically confirms his role as her escort as they prepare to move together.
A close-up captures the moment as Ian reaches out to guide her gently by the hand.
Ian calls out in confusion when she suddenly stops and pouts with an unhappy expression.
Turning away, Eloise loudly protests that this simple form of escorting isn't enough for her.
Ian's legs freeze in place as she repeats her firm rejection of his current assistance.
Eloise demands more from him, warning that he won't get away with just a handshake. Looking deeply perplexed, Ian asks what exactly she is trying to say to him now.
She clutches her dress, lamenting that holding hands cannot fix her deep, hidden loneliness.
Losing her temper, Eloise shouts that he is nothing more than an empty-headed robot.
A chibi Ian stands stunned by the insult while she continues her tearful, frustrated outburst.
She questions if his handsome looks are all that matters, wishing for his true happiness instead.
Ian attempts to steady her, asking her to stop her loud and hurtful accusations.
He gazes intently at her as she wonders if he would even listen to her suffering.
Poking his chest, she complains that she can't speak her mind anywhere without judgment.
Eloise leans against him, sobbing about how lonely and miserable he makes her feel.
Ian's eyes widen with shock as the weight of her raw, drunken honesty hits him.
Ian is left bewildered as Eloise suddenly falls into a deep sleep in his arms.
Despite finding her behavior annoying, Ian holds her close as she sleeps against him.
A flashback shows a younger Eloise walking alone at night, burdened by isolation and grief.
A silver-haired boy stands alone in the shadows, told to hide his weaknesses from everyone.
Ian remains in the hall, silently cradling the woman who just shared her misery.
The morning sun rises over the elegant mansion, signaling the start of a new day. Awakening in her bed, Eloise immediately groans from the pain of an intense hangover. Sitting up, she desperately tries to piece together how she managed to return home. She recalls her struggle to stay sane before everything blurred together inside the carriage. Eloise is mortified to realize she has a low tolerance for alcohol after last night. Deciding she must move on, she tells herself to finally get up from bed. Glancing at the clock, she realizes she has missed her morning breakfast once again.
Sitting up in bed, Eloise responds as a soft knock sounds at her door. The gray-haired steward enters, making Eloise wonder why her maid Vivi isn't there instead. Still groggy from her hangover, Eloise asks the steward why he is visiting so early.
He asks if she is attending breakfast, leaving her confused by the unnecessary formality.
The steward explains that Ian specifically requested to wait at the table for her arrival.
Shocked by the news, Eloise confirms if the Grand Duke actually made such a request.
Glancing at the ornate clock, she is horrified to see it is already past 10.
Eloise rejects the steward's offer to cancel her attendance, deciding she must go immediately.
Despite her lingering hangover, Eloise nervously makes her way toward the mansion's dining hall. Ian sits alone at the massive table, quietly reading the newspaper while waiting for her.
Entering the room, Eloise is stunned to find that Ian truly waited for her. She notices the food is fresh and warm, unlike the cold meals of the past.
Looking wary, Eloise wonders if this sudden kindness is actually a hidden test from him.
Ian notes her tardiness, making Eloise realize just how long he has been waiting. She questions why he is doing this when he claims to be so busy today.
Ian remains stoic and silent, hidden behind his newspaper as the tension between them grows. A chibi Eloise concludes that this confusing behavior is typical for the unpredictable Ian.
They begin their meal in the vast, silent hall attended by two formal servants.
Eloise stares into her soup, feeling the heavy and awkward atmosphere during their breakfast.
When a maid serves a special dish, a curious Eloise asks what it is.
Ian reveals he ordered the chef to prepare a special soup for her hangover.
Completely bewildered, Eloise struggles to process this unexpected display of care from her husband.
She asks for confirmation, still unable to believe Ian would be so thoughtful toward her.
Ian looks at her blankly, wondering why she finds his simple gestures so problematic. Terrified, Eloise thinks his kindness signals an impending disaster or the world's end.
She notes Ian hasn't left yet, though he would usually have gone by now. Ian gracefully wipes his mouth, finished with his meal, but remaining in his seat.
Eloise realizes with a start that he is intentionally matching her slow eating pace.
Ian mentions he has been waiting to tell her something, making her anxious to finish. Feeling physically ill from the suspense, Eloise tells him to proceed with his message.
Ian advises her to drink in moderation, causing her to blush and agree sheepishly.
He suggests they should strive to have breakfast together as much as possible. A sudden choke sounds as Eloise reels from Ian's promise to wait for her. She is left completely baffled by his uncharacteristic desire to spend time with her.
Ian explains his busy schedule makes further time difficult, leaving Eloise suspicious of his motives. Realization suddenly strikes her, and Eloise's expression turns from confusion to pure dread.
She nervously asks if anything notable happened after her drunken arrival the previous night.
Ian offers no immediate answer, staring at her with an unreadable and intense gaze.
Silence hangs over the grand table as they stare at each other in a stalemate.
Remembering her bold insults from last night, Eloise realizes she is in deep trouble.
She offers a weak, hopeful smile while Ian remains ominously quiet about her behavior. Ian contemplates the nature of white lies as he watches his wife's obvious discomfort.
Her spirit crumbles as Eloise decides that dying of embarrassment is her only option. With a soft thud, she collapses onto the table, overwhelmed by her mortifying memories.
Eloise screams in frustration as Vivi enters with a letter from the imperial family.
The maid covers her eyes, hilariously claiming she saw absolutely nothing of the Duchess's breakdown. Eloise is mortified, knowing full well that Vivi witnessed her entire pathetic display.
Composing herself, Eloise asks about the letter Vivi brought from the imperial family. The ornate envelope from the princess is presented, sealed with a distinctive red wax seal.
Eloise prepares to open the correspondence, noting the princess's characteristically hasty nature.
Eloise quietly reads the princess's personal letter, appearing lost in deep and serious thought.
The letter requests a visit with Madame Z tomorrow, mentioning how everyone admired her dress.
Eloise informs her maid Vivi about the princess's invitation to the palace for the following day.
An enthusiastic Vivi promises to prepare diligently for the visit while Eloise confirms the timing.
Staring at a tray, Eloise reflects on how things have unexpectedly taken this particular turn.
From her seat on the bed, Eloise asks Vivi if she knows about the Aria newsletter. Vivi excitedly confirms her knowledge of the exclusive newsletter while clutching her hands together. Recalling rumors about the publication, Eloise smiles as she realizes those stories were actually true. Vivi explains that the subscription-based newsletter is usually only heard of through rumors among commoners.
Narrations describe the exclusive, expensive newsletter that covers scandalous high society issues and secret noble affairs.
Eloise decides to subscribe immediately, delighting Vivi, who offers to inform the butler at once.
Vivi wonders if they can still receive today's edition since it is the day of publication.
Eloise insists on obtaining today's copy, though Vivi notes her mistress's previous lack of interest.
A sweating chibi Eloise nervously wonders if she truly expressed disinterest in the newsletter before.
A monochromatic memory shows a serious Eloise sitting in a study across from a stern butler.
Chibi Eloise admits to herself that her former cold stance was very characteristic of her. Laughing it off, Eloise explains to Vivi that opinions naturally change over time.
Vivi accepts the explanation and asks if Eloise enjoyed her time at the party yesterday.
Eloise hesitates while Vivi notes that she was undoubtedly the center of attention at the event. Vivi praises Eloise as the flower of high society, surprised she ever avoided social gatherings.
Smiling, Eloise admits staying informed is wise now that she plans to attend more social events.
Deeply moved, Vivi stares at her mistress with sparkling eyes and a joyful, emotional expression.
Vivi bows respectfully, vowing to fetch the latest newsletter and inform the butler right away.
Eloise stops her, appearing uneasy as she prepares to ask about the previous night's events.
With a bead of sweat, Eloise asks if anything else notable happened during her drunken return.
Vivi asks if she's referring to the moment the master carried her to her bedroom. A shocked and speechless expression crosses Eloise's face as the embarrassing reality begins to sink in. Vivi explains Ian carried her to bed and then requested the maids to help her change. Looking horrified, Eloise desperately asks if there were any other incidents from that night. Vivi hesitates, but Eloise urges her to speak freely, promising there will be no punishment.
Vivi reveals reports of Eloise shouting at Ian and making an emotional confession in the lobby.
Overwhelmed by embarrassment, Eloise covers her face as she processes the mortifying news of her behavior.
Vivi tries to comfort her mistress, insisting the situation wasn't as bad as she imagines.
Distraught, Eloise can only utter a cry of despair as her mortification continues to grow.
Realization strikes as Eloise worries Ian misinterpreted her drunken words about him and Diana as a confession.
She laments her lack of control, blaming her behavior entirely on her state of intoxication.
Despondent, Eloise sits on her bed and declares that alcohol is truly her greatest enemy. Vivi reiterates that the atmosphere wasn't terrible and emphasizes how the master personally helped her.
Vivi assures her that the servants understand her struggle, though Eloise remains buried in her hands.
Vivi mentions Ian waited for breakfast, leading Eloise to worry he suspects she has a crush. Eloise cries out an apology to Diana, feeling like she messed everything up with her antics.
Wishing for solitude, Eloise dismisses Vivi so she can begin an immediate session of repentant prayer. Vivi leaves the room with a concerned expression, looking back at her distraught mistress one last time. Vivi offers a parting cheer of support while a tiny chibi Eloise remains slumped in despair.
The morning sun shines on the grand mansion as a new day officially begins.
Madame Z, a blue-haired woman in formal attire, arrives at the mansion looking somewhat anxious.
Eloise, now dressed in a teal gown, informs a trembling Madame Z about their palace visit.
A panicked chibi Madame Z is shocked to learn they are departing for the palace today.
While Madame Z worries, Eloise notes that commoners rarely get the chance to see royalty.
A faceless blonde royal sits on a throne, illustrating how even famous designers lack royal audiences.
Eloise's brown hair, teal gown dismisses Madame Zed's purple-haired dramatic threat to jump.
She considers the princess's notorious reputation while a shadowy blonde figure looms over the designer.
Eloise reassures her guest as she prepares to sip her drink.
Madame Z remains visibly shaken, clutching her chest while addressing her mistress. With a bright smile and thumbs up, Eloise promises the visit will not be fatal.
Click-clack, the horse-drawn carriage carries the two women toward their royal destination. Inside the vehicle, Madame Z tentatively asks the Grand Duchess for permission to speak. The designer frantically questions why a member of royalty would want to see her.
Eloise realizes she forgot to explain the reason, caught in the princess's impulsive momentum.
Laughing it off, she tells Madame Z the truth will be revealed upon arrival.
They arrive at the sprawling, meticulously manicured gardens of the sun-drenched imperial palace.
The energetic blonde princess runs toward them while her maids trail behind in a panic.
Eloise muses that the princess's conduct would have surely provoked a lecture from others.
The princess joyfully greets them while Eloise offers a polite, formal response. Inquisitively, the princess asks Eloise how she has been since their last meeting. Eloise says she's well, while the princess expresses how much she missed her friend. Eloise formally introduces the terrified Madame Zed to the high-spirited member of royalty.
Madame Zed offers a deeply formal and stuttering greeting to Princess Louisa.
The princess's eyes sparkle with curiosity as she leans in to inspect her guest.
To the designer's shock, the princess mistakenly identifies her as someone named Jeremy. Correcting her mistake, the princess asks if she is actually the famed Madame Zed.
A silent, intense atmosphere falls as the princess continues her sharp, focused inspection.
Madame Zed stands frozen and sweating, unable to move under the princess's scrutiny.
They are led into a magnificent dressing room filled with rows of elegant gowns.
The wide view reveals a vast hall dedicated entirely to the princess's extensive wardrobe.
Both visitors gasp in shock, comparing the massive room to a grand exhibition hall.
The princess beams with pride while showing off her treasure vault of fine clothing.
Madame Zed is completely dazzled by the sight, which she describes as heaven.
The princess is delighted that her impressive collection has left her guests in awe.
She grandly announces that Madame Zed will be responsible for creating her future outfits.
Madame Zed realizes Eloise kept the news secret to prevent her from fleeing earlier.
The princess asks if she's displeased, causing the designer to frantically deny any offense.
Trembling, Madame Zed admits the suddenness of the proposal simply took her by surprise.
The teenage princess lectures the older woman about life's unpredictability, leading to a bow.
Eloise finds it frustratingly absurd that a 14-year-old is giving life advice to an adult.
Madame Zed asks for specific details on the dress design the princess wants. The princess hums thoughtfully, considering her requirements for the new garment.
She lists a series of contradictory traits demanding something both simple and glamorous. Eloise compares the impossible request to a ridiculous coffee order, worrying for her designer.
To Eloise's surprise, Madame Zed is suddenly struck by a wave of inspiration.
The designer asks to begin working immediately as new ideas flood her mind. The princess encourages her, though she mistakenly calls the designer Madame Geranium. The scene transitions to a well-set tea table with assorted cakes and fruits.
Clink. Eloise sips her tea while pondering the strange synergy of eccentric personalities.
The princess finds the time fulfilling, while Eloise feels exhausted by the chaotic energy. The princess praises her own judgment and asks where Eloise found such a gem.
Eloise sips her tea contentedly, happy that the princess is pleased with the designer.
The princess snacks while Eloise mentions how worried the designer was about visiting.
The princess questions why anyone would find her royal home a cause for worry.
Slurp. The princess takes a long, satisfied drink from her ornate teacup.
The blonde princess expresses her envy, asking Eloise if she will hand over her talented tailor.
Eloise politely apologizes to her highness with a nervous smile and a bead of sweat.
Hearing the refusal, the blonde princess laughs cheerfully while Eloise thanks her for her understanding. Pouting slightly, the blonde princess wonders aloud what sort of consideration Eloise is referring to.
Eloise suggests a proposal, asking if she could request one more thing from the princess.
The blonde princess is delighted by the suggestion, her face radiant with a bright, joyous expression. She eagerly asks the Grand Duchess if there is something she desires in return for her favor. A dark, sly aura surrounds Eloise as she realizes the princess has fallen perfectly into her trap.
Eloise acts humble while pouring tea, telling the princess it is okay to refuse her offer.
The blonde princess insists on helping, clutching her hands together in her excitement. Eloise hums thoughtfully while looking at the table of cakes, pretending to weigh her options. The blonde princess waits expectantly with a hopeful and sparkling gaze, waiting for the Duchess to speak. Eloise proposes a verbal agreement for a future request, which leaves the young princess looking surprised.
A red wish ticket appears among roses, symbolizing the favor the princess has just promised to grant.
Eloise confirms the arrangement with a charming smile and a knowing finger raised in the air.
The blonde princess's eyes sparkle with excitement as she excitedly agrees that the idea sounds fun. Chibi versions show the princess feeling like a wish-granting fairy, while Eloise plays along with the fantasy.
Eloise notes the princess's youthful spirit while celebrating that her plan is moving forward smoothly. Thinking ahead, Eloise plans to use this future favor for Diana once the girl finally returns.
Narrations explain how the princess's influence could help the pink-haired Diana reclaim her high social status.
Flashbacks depict a past conflict between the girls that Eloise hopes to mend for her own exit.
The blonde princess notices Eloise's mischievous expression and asks what she is currently plotting. Laughing nervously, Eloise explains that people often find her smiling face to be a bit strange.
The focus shifts back to the tea table as Eloise thanks the princess for her continued kindness.
The blonde princess whistles and hums, claiming she isn't actually being that considerate to her guest. With a sudden, energetic clap of her hands, the princess regains the Grand Duchess's full attention.
The two women sit across from each other at the meticulously set imperial tea table.
The blonde princess asks a blunt question about the relationship between Eloise and her brother, the Duke.
Eloise is reminded of her own youthful curiosity when she asked a teacher about their first love.
From across the table, the blonde princess presses her guest for more details about the couple's status.
Looking stern, the princess claims she can't be fooled by their sudden display of getting along well.
Eloise looks away, realizing how difficult it is to lie to those who are family to Ian.
Gesturing with her hands, Eloise explains that marriage dynamics can naturally improve over time.
Chibi Eloise stays nervous while the blonde princess declares that the simple answer is quite boring.
Eloise suggests leaving the topic for later as the princess prepares for her next noble visitor.
The blonde princess looks thoughtful, wondering if the couple she sees has truly changed for the better.
The princess admits she didn't like Eloise much in the past, but has recently changed her mind.
The blonde princess laughs heartily while admitting she truly likes the Grand Duchess now.
Eloise worries that the princess should really save her affection for the pink-haired Diana instead. A maid enters the room to announce the arrival of the Duchess of Berluse for her meeting. Standing up, the blonde princess informs Eloise that she must depart for her royal lessons. Eloise watches the princess walk away, noticing the intricate green pattern embroidered on her gown. The blonde princess offers a playful wink and a goodbye while flowers bloom around her.
The evening sun shines on the grand imperial palace as the scene shifts to the gardens.
Walking through the lush gardens, Eloise finds the landscape much prettier than the Grand Duke's home.
A sharp snap sounds as Eloise's high-heeled shoe catches on a stone in the garden path.
Crying out in surprise, Eloise loses her balance and begins to tumble forward toward the ground.
A handsome, brown-haired man catches her with a firm grip, surprising the startled Duchess.
Flustered, Eloise raises her hands and assures the second male lead type that she is fine.
The man apologizes for his touch, while a relieved Eloise realizes she almost broke a bone.
Eloise contemplates the difficulty of fixing a fractured world without proper support.
The handsome, brown-haired man smiles, catching Eloise's attention with his striking, non-extra appearance. Duke Hayden Roger introduces himself to Grand Duchess Cloud, prompting her to recognize his influential name.
Narrative text explains the Roger family's rich history as a dominant force within the Empress's faction.
Eloise apologizes for her delayed recognition as Hayden gallantly assists her after her stumble.
Hayden graciously dismisses her apology, admitting this is their first time meeting so closely.
Startled by his familiarity, Eloise curiously asks if Hayden recognized her right away.
Hayden explains her fame while Chibi Eloise wonders if her social reputation has grown that much.
Hayden mentions meeting at a previous party would have been ideal, and Eloise notes his quick wit. Lush garden scenery accompanies Hayden's explanation that urgent matters kept him from the recent seasonal party.
Thump thump, Eloise blushes at Hayden's charm, wishing her husband Ian possessed even half his social qualities.
Hayden inquires about the Grand Duke's absence, and Eloise explains she visited the palace alone.
Eloise brightly reveals she was summoned by the princess, leaving Hayden looking slightly surprised. Chibi Hayden realizes the princess's name acts as a free pass within the Imperial Palace grounds.
Hayden observes that the Grand Duke failed to escort her, his expression turning thoughtful and intense.
Hayden offers his arm to escort her to the carriage to avoid the uneven garden stones.
Click! Eloise's high heel catches on the stones, highlighting the danger of her previous mindless walking.
Eloise accepts the Duke's help while he gently advises her to watch her footing. The two walk together through a floral aura as Eloise thanks him for his chivalry.
Arriving at the carriage, Hayden claims the honor of escorting her was entirely his privilege.
Hayden heaps praise on Eloise, labeling her the flower of the social world with a smile. Flustered by the excessive compliment, Eloise notes that Ian definitely has a long way to go. Hayden maintains his polite demeanor, insisting he is simply a lucky man to be by her side. Hayden offers a respectful and intimate goodbye, leaving Eloise feeling noticeably shaken by his charm.
A dark, intense aura surrounds Hayden's handsome face as Eloise wonders if he is genuinely flirting.
The scene shifts to the grand exterior of the Grand Duke's residence under a starry night sky. Eloise returns home and encounters Ian walking through the dimly lit hallway. Ian bluntly remarks on her late arrival, prompting Eloise to offer a brief, dismissive explanation.
Chibi versions show Eloise reminding Ian it's dinner time while he indicates he is already waiting.
An awkward silence falls over the hallway as the couple stares at each other without speaking.
Eloise lectures Ian on social etiquette, annoyed by his lack of a polite follow-up question.
She prompts him to ask about her meal, and Ian responds with a confused expression. Ian dutifully asks if she is eaten, leading Eloise to note that he at least follows directions. Eloise explains her dessert-filled afternoon with the princess, opting for only a light soup later. Eloise feels irritated by Ian's perceived indifference, comparing his coldness to Hayden's earlier warmth. Looking down at Ian, Eloise mentions that she has been thinking deeply about their situation. Eloise concludes that a proper, affectionate man is clearly superior, staring pointedly at the silver-haired duke.
Sigh. Eloise tells Ian he should try harder before walking away in frustration.
Eloise laments her fate as she departs, leaving a silent Ian standing alone in the hallway. Entering her room, Eloise finds her maid Bibi waiting eagerly for news of the palace visit.
Bibi excitedly asks if the Grand Duchess had a good time during her royal appointment. Ha! Eloise lets out a wild, manic laugh that leaves Bibi looking completely bewildered.
Chibi Bibi cowers in shock, worried she has accidentally offended her mistress with a simple question. Eloise clarifies that the experience was fun yet overwhelming, relieving the anxious young maid. Bibi presses for more details, curious about what special events occurred during the royal invitation.
Lost in a dreamy daze, Eloise considers her meeting with the handsome Duke Roger a success.
Eloise settles onto a blue divan and instructs Bibi to begin preparing her bathwater. Bibi shares that she subscribed to the Aria newsletter and the butler delivered the latest edition.
A tray holds a rolled scroll, loose papers, and an ornate quill, ready for review.
Bibi presents the newsletter to Eloise, who prepares to catch up on the latest social news.
Eloise holds a quill and paper as narration explains the magic of the newsletter's instant text. Close-up of the dark-haired Eloise's face as she contemplates the magic within the ordinary-looking items. Bibi shows Eloise the front page of the newsletter, which features a headline about the Grand Duchess. Eloise reads the intense headline regarding the ghostly rebellion and looks forward to the next edition. Closing her eyes, Eloise notes that using catchy titles to draw public attention is a familiar tactic. Looking focused, Eloise peers at the bottom of the page to find what other news is hidden. Eloise notes that the section for rumors and public feedback feels exactly like a modern internet comment section. Resting on her divan, Eloise feels surprised that public opinion shifted so significantly after only one article. Bibi asks if the Grand Duchess is feeling hurt, but Eloise looks more surprised than pained. Smiling warmly, Eloise assures the maid she is fine and asks to receive the weekly updates promptly. Eloise dismisses Bibi, who bows and heads off to prepare the bathwater for her mistress.
Alone in her room, Eloise drops the newsletter and scroll onto the table with a quick sound.
Lying down with a mischievous grin, Eloise decides it is time to casually stir things up.
Eloise focuses on the gossip section about the Grand Duke, deciding to write her own story next.
A hand grips the ornate quill firmly as Eloise prepares to pen her new social narrative. Laughing with a manic joy, Eloise writes her story while magic sparkles emanate from the page. The morning sun shines on the palace as birds chirp tweet-tweet among blooming pink roses.
Eloise and the silver-haired Ian sit at opposite ends of a long, elegantly set breakfast table.
Ian offers a generic greeting about the weather, which Eloise finds entirely predictable and a bit dull. Looking out at the clear blue sky, Eloise decides to let his boring greeting slide for today. The scene focuses on the meticulously prepared meal set upon the ornate tablecloth during their breakfast.
Dressed in a black and white gown, Eloise reads the newsletter while eating, ignoring her husband's presence.
From the other end of the table, Ian stares intensely at Eloise while she remains engrossed in reading.
Sensing the heavy gaze, a flustered Eloise hides her face behind the newsletter to avoid eye contact.
Groaning, in frustration, Eloise finally asks the Grand Duke if there is something on his mind. Ian asks what she is looking at so intently while the butler flinches at the awkward atmosphere.
Laughing at his lack of social awareness, Eloise explains she is simply reading the morning's social newsletter.
Eloise explains that she subscribed to the high society reports to keep track of the latest rumors.
Eloise admits she wasn't usually curious until the rumors started involving her firsthand, causing Ian to flinch. Eloise presents the front page to Ian, noting that the latest article about them was actually decent.
A close-up of the newsletter shows various rumors and comments regarding the Duke and Duchess's public behavior. Ian observes that she seems to be enjoying the gossip, and Eloise happily confirms her amusement.
Ian takes a bite of his food and dismissively remarks that her enjoyment is a good thing.
Eloise asks what else he intends to say, surprised that he isn't more curious about the public's opinion. Eloise points out that Ian is in this social situation precisely because he shows so little interest.
Eloise laughs heartily behind a floral aura, clearly enjoying her meal and her husband's social awkwardness.
A red carriage travels down a busy city street lined with tall, classic brick buildings.
Inside, Ian reminds Eloise that she previously claimed not to care about what other people think. Smiling brightly, Eloise says, "Great," leaving the silver-haired Duke looking confused by her sudden high spirits.
Onlookers are shocked to see the Grand Duke and Duchess out together, confirming the rumors from the newsletter.
People in the street chatter and murmur, surprised that the couple's relationship has truly improved as reported.
Eloise glows with a celebrity-like aura, enjoying the public attention her plan has successfully generated.
Ian places his hand on the wall with a clack and asks if she has a specific destination.
Two silhouetted figures whisper about the couple as Ian and Eloise walk through a bright floral hall.
Eloise notes that Ian's willingness to accompany her without complaint is a major step forward for him.
Gazing at the handsome, silver-haired Duke, Eloise realizes he truly embodies the role of a male lead.
Eloise comments on how long it has been since she last visited the downtown area with him. Eloise declares that since he usually takes the lead, today she will be the one in charge.
A sudden pause sounds as their feet come to a complete stop on the cobblestone path.
Startled, Eloise turns back to look at Ian, wondering why he has suddenly stopped in his tracks.
Eloise crossly suggests they should just call their outing a family trip. Ian holds his head, suggesting a date instead as Eloise looks on. A huffing Eloise insists it is merely a practice date, nothing more.
The silver-haired Ian looks back at her with a questioning, intense gaze.
A sudden realization strikes Eloise as she spots a building in the distance.
Eloise points out a beautiful building situated in a prime city location. Two nobles discuss the high-traffic area as they walk past the storefront.
Eloise laughs gleefully, leaving Ian watching her with his arms folded tightly.
Eloise recalls the pink-haired Diana struggling to start her shop in an alley.
Annoyance flares in Eloise as she remembers Ian's lack of help for Diana. Scenes of Diana gardening and remodeling her building fill Eloise's nostalgic thoughts.
Ian asks if she likes business while Eloise giggles about Diana's future success. Ian bluntly tells Eloise she possesses no talent for business, surprising her. A chibi Eloise is shocked by Ian's arrogant dismissal of her business skills. Eloise laughs, telling Ian that Diana's future success will eventually humble him. Ian stares silently at Eloise, his handsome features highlighted by a floral background. Walking away, Eloise reminds herself the goal is public perception, not shopping. In the bookstore, Eloise tells Ian to stand close and act natural.
Eloise smiles for the crowd, noting that everyone is watching their public display. Eloise instructs a reluctant Ian to place his hand firmly on her waist. Eloise reminds Ian that normal couples act affectionately on dates, even practice ones.
Sparks of interest fly between background nobles observing the couple's intimate behavior. Ian carries several heavy shopping bags, questioning why they aren't using servants.
Turning with a flourish, Eloise explains that chivalry is currently the height of fashion.
Eloise poses with a lacy pink parasol, asking Ian for his fashion opinion.
A tiny chibi Ian indifferently claims all the parasols look exactly the same. Frustrated, Eloise tells him to choose with the care of giving a gift.
Ian argues that efficiency is better than the sentimentality of choosing gifts.
Chibi versions of the couple bicker over the true meaning of a gift.
The city skyline glows under a soft pink sunset as the day ends.
Eloise admits to herself that her simple plan was derailed by irresistible shopping.
Ian and a maid stand together, completely overwhelmed by Eloise's many purchases.
A sharp clink sounds as a purple jewel falls from Eloise's shoe.
A close-up reveals the ornate purple decoration lying abandoned on the ground.
Ian makes a dry comment about Eloise's clear enjoyment of their outing. Ian reaches down to retrieve the fallen jewel while Eloise looks on curiously.
Eloise huffs, thinking she is not Diana and doesn't want a real date.
Smiling brightly, Eloise suggests they return home after a fun afternoon. Ian says nothing, simply staring at Eloise with a serious, focused expression.
Ian surprises Eloise by suggesting they visit one more location before leaving.
A hesitant Eloise wonders why Ian is suddenly acting so differently towards her.
Ian extends his hand toward Eloise amidst a shimmering aura of flower petals.
The couple walks together toward the large brick building Eloise admired earlier.
Eloise wonders if they are stopping because of her fallen shoe decoration.
Ian asks why she asks questions when she already knows the obvious answer. A startled chibi Eloise wonders if Ian can actually read her inner thoughts. A jingle sounds as the couple enters a bustling upscale shoe boutique.
The shopworker is stunned into silence by the Grand Duke's presence.
With a scramble, the worker frantically greets the royal couple in a panic.
The worker trembles before them as Eloise notes his terrified, over-the-top reaction.
Ian looms over Eloise as she apologizes for questioning why they are visiting a shoe shop.
A heavy silence fills the boutique as the couple's presence captures everyone's nervous attention.
Eloise clenches her shawl and laughs, assuring the staff they will only look around quietly.
Squeezing Ian's arm, Eloise playfully reminds him he suggested they should browse the shop together.
Ian looks visibly flustered while claiming he is actually quite capable of handling these social situations. Eloise asks if that is truly the case, her expression sparkling as she teases her husband.
With a wave, Eloise dismisses the boutique worker and tells him to return to his work.
The scene shifts as the couple prepares to look at footwear in the quiet upscale shop. Startled, Eloise asks if the silver-haired Ian is truly going to pick out a gift for her. Ian maintains a serious and focused expression while considering the various shoe choices before him.
Eloise wonders if Ian is finally applying the social lessons she previously taught him about dates. A close-up reveals Eloise's wide green eyes as she watches Ian's unexpected and attentive behavior.
Ian presents two vastly different pairs of shoes. Talk about an interesting sense of versatile fashion.
Ian observes that Eloise has a good eye for style, and she confidently agrees with him.
Frustrated, Eloise thinks that Ian always manages to ruin a perfectly good and romantic moment. Ian presents the footwear and bluntly tells Eloise she should try them on in order.
Eloise gives Ian a long, unimpressed stare as he stands, waiting for her to react.
Smiling radiantly, Eloise asks the silver-haired Duke to put the shoes on for her himself. Eloise thinks that if he brought her here, he should see the practice date through properly.
A soft hee-hee escapes Eloise as she enjoys teasing Ian during their public outing together.
Ian suddenly kneels before her, causing a startled, "Huh?" to escape from a shocked Eloise.
Ian selects the canary yellow heels as the first pair for the Duchess to try on. Ian carefully holds the delicate yellow heel, looking focused and serious about his unexpected task. From her seat on the divan, Eloise watches Ian with an intense and questioning stare. Surrounded by a floral aura, Eloise sits gracefully while Ian continues to assist her with the shoes.
A close-up shows Ian's hands as he gently slides the yellow shoe onto Eloise's foot.
Eloise gestures while explaining a superstition about good shoes leading people to much better places.
A memory of an old movie on a VHS screen highlights her thoughts about romantic parting gifts.
Ian looks genuinely surprised, admitting he has never heard of such a cinematic scenario before. Eloise mentions a childhood superstition, causing Ian to question where she actually grew up. Sweating nervously, Eloise laughs and lies about living somewhere else for a bit during her childhood.
Eloise feels relieved when Ian doesn't press for more information about her mysterious past.
Ian stares at Eloise with a piercing gaze, highlighted by a background of dark, blooming roses. Ian continues holding her ankle as Eloise reacts with a confused, "Huh?" to his heavy silence. A blushing Ian apologizes and asks her to repeat what she had just said to him. Eloise repeats her question, asking if Ian is planning to go somewhere nice with her.
Startled by the sudden change in atmosphere, Eloise wonders why he asked such a strange thing. A soft memory of a woman in a wide-brimmed hat fills Eloise's nostalgic and thoughtful mind.
Eloise wonders why he is asking such a question while still firmly holding onto her ankle.
Flustered, Eloise clarifies that she didn't have any specific destination in mind for their afternoon outing.
A blushing Eloise finally asks Ian if he could please let go of her ankle now. Ian stands and bluntly tells her she is done and can stand up from the divan.
Eloise is left blinking in confusion, wondering why he even bothered to ask her a question.
Watching him walk away, Eloise reminds herself that Ian Cloud has always been quite predictable.
A small, satisfied smile appears on Ian's face as he notes her predictable and flustered reaction.
Later, a soft clink sounds as Ian sets down his jacket in his dark, quiet bedroom.
Ian holds up the purple jewel, wondering if it has been in his possession the whole time.
Ian recalls Eloise's meticulous nature and wonders how she could have lost her shoe jewel. Holding the jewel to his eye, Ian admits to himself that he truly does not understand her. Back in the shop, Eloise repeats her request for Ian to finally let go of her ankle.
The red-haired aide reacts with shock, questioning what happened while holding a document. Charging forward with a sudden dash, the aide asks why Ian was smiling earlier.
Ian looms silently, his serious expression returning instantly while the red-haired man watches him.
Noticing the purple jewel in Ian's hand, the aide asks about the mysterious object. Chibi versions of the men argue while Ian remains silent about the glowing purple jewel.
Excitedly, the aide suggests the jewel is cursed and offers to use his magic.
Startled with a sudden ack, the chibi red-haired aide cowers in fear or shock. The aide expresses concern over Ian's strange behavior, while Ian dismisses his unnecessary worries.
Mockingly, the aide poses dramatically and compares Ian's behavior to a love-struck young girl. Looking disgusted, Ian demands to know when the man will stop with this nonsense.
Sliding over quarterly reports, the aide notes Ian only deflects when he dislikes the conversation.
Letting out a frustrated "ha,"
Ian clutches his head while reviewing the territory's paperwork.
The red-haired aide reports that the territory has remained peaceful with exceptionally good weather. With a respectful bow, the aide confirms that no major incidents occurred this quarter.
News of the Emperor's upcoming summons causes a tense, sudden freeze in the atmosphere.
The aide explains the summons relates to questions regarding the princess's upcoming birthday celebration.
Ian recalls a romantic memory of a public kiss shared with Eloise at a manor.
Letting out a heavy sigh, Ian anticipates a major headache from the impending imperial attention.
Ian nods and instructs the aide to finish all the necessary paperwork by the weekend.
Turning to leave, the red-haired man pauses to ask his master one final question. Ian waits patiently with a serious expression for the aide to speak his mind. Making a quick escape before trouble starts, the aide departs with a sharp clack.
Ian exhales a tired ha, noting how his assistant grows more audacious every single day.
A bright, happy memory of Eloise laughing gleefully amidst flowers fills Ian's contemplative thoughts.
Ian remembers kneeling before Eloise during their recent outing at the upscale shoe boutique.
In the memory, Eloise blushes while asking Ian to finally let go of her ankle. Looking at the jewel, Ian smiles and admits the outing actually wasn't so bad. A bright morning sun shines on the manor while a maid announces the newsletter's arrival. The brown-haired maid excitedly delivers the news to a surprised and slightly worried Eloise.
Chuckling, Eloise finds stories about other people's romances entertaining and is curious about herself.
With a soft rustle, Eloise begins flipping through the newsletter to find her own story. A headline about a jewel war between noble houses catches Eloise's judgmental, curious attention.
Dismissing the unknown family, Eloise decides that if she can't remember them, they aren't important.
Flipping the page, Eloise searches specifically for the article concerning herself and the Grand Duke.
Eloise finds the Cinderella-themed article detailing their public display of affection on Rilton Street.
Giggles softly, Eloise is delighted that everything is going exactly according to her grand plan.
Eloise notes that public interest is high for their appearance at the upcoming birthday banquet. Realizing they drew significant attention at the shoe shop, Eloise hums in thoughtful satisfaction. A sudden, embarrassing memory of Ian causes Eloise to let out a startled ack.
Clutching the newsletter, Eloise crumples the paper while panicking over whether Ian saw the gossip.
The scene shifts to the dining hall as Ian sits alone at a sprawling table.
Looking at the clock, Eloise marvels at how early the Grand Duke wakes up every day.
Entering the room, Eloise greets the silver-haired Ian with a bright and cheerful smile.
Ian looks up from his food, suggesting that she should try changing her repetitive greeting. Continuing to browse the newsletter, Ian offers to hear any specific greeting she might prefer. Eloise turns away in frustration, mentally labeling her husband a broken tin can robot.
A sharp clack sounds as servants serve breakfast at opposite ends of the long table.
Eloise watches Ian read while a blonde-haired maid observes the couple from the background. The cheerful blonde maid gives Eloise an encouraging and knowing thumbs up from across the room. Feeling stiff and awkward, Eloise wonders if the staff has already read the gossip article. Eloise feels highly suspicious as she wonders why everyone keeps winking at her today. Surrounded by a floral aura, the silver-haired Ian remains calm while Eloise observes his usual behavior. Looking visibly startled and anxious, Eloise questions why she feels so incredibly on edge. During breakfast, Eloise mentions the latest newsletter article, sparking Ian's curiosity about the publication. Ian holds the paper as Eloise explains that the newest article covers their weekend outing. Thinking he is a literal tin can robot, Chibi Eloise predicts Ian will respond predictably. Sitting across the long table, Ian asks for specific details regarding the article's contents. Eloise looks surprised and flustered when Ian repeats his question about the gossip column.
Ian tilts his head curiously, asking if his sudden interest in the news is a problem.
Against a dark, swirling background, Eloise is stunned that the typically indifferent Ian is asking about gossip.
Ian clasps his hands and stares intently, his serious expression framed by blooming purple flowers.
The atmosphere softens as Ian continues to wait patiently for his wife to answer him.
Eloise wonders if someone poisoned Ian's food since he is behaving so uncharacteristically.
Ian reminds her of her previous interest in the newsletter as they continue their meal together. A heavy, silent stare from Ian's piercing purple eyes makes the air feel thick with tension. Blushing and coughing, Eloise tries to explain that the gossip covers all of high society.
Eloise notes that the newsletter is published anonymously, leaving the writer's identity a complete mystery.
Ian considers the possibility of a noble author while asking about the publication's frequency. A chibi Ian tilts his head as Eloise wonders if he even has time for gossip. Letting out a tired ha, Eloise explains the weekly release schedule and the nature of the articles.
A sharp clack sounds as Eloise paces, deeply confused by the sudden change in Ian's behavior. Ian appears exceptionally handsome amidst flowers, making his new attitude even more bewildering to Eloise.
The sound of chitter and chatter fills the room while Eloise imagines Ian reading online comments.
Eloise's green eyes sparkle with realization as she decides Ian's new hobby might actually be beneficial.
She hopes that the blunt opinions of high society will help Ian understand social dynamics better.
A long, exhausted ha escapes Eloise's lips as she tries to compose herself.
Determined to move forward, Eloise decides to stop overthinking and focus on her official work.
Eloise reflects on how the future of the pink-haired Diana is inextricably tied to the manor. A memory of a weeping Diana reinforces Eloise's resolve not to run away from her duties.
A sudden rattle startles the Duchess as she vows to protect her pride and the estate.
Eloise discovers a red book filled with detailed notes hidden away in a desk drawer.
She marvels at how the notes serve as a perfect handover guide for managing the vast territory.
Looking skeptical, Eloise questions why the original owner of her body would create such detailed documents.
She gives a quick shake of her head, dismissing the mystery in favor of practical estate management.
A sudden knock-knock at the door announces the arrival of the brown-haired maid, Vivi.
Vivi peeks into the room, hesitating as she prepares to deliver an item to the Duchess.
Vivi presents a rolled scroll and a dark quill she found while cleaning the bedroom. Eloise reaches for the items, curious to see what the maid discovered on the floor.
With a quick zoom, the energetic maid rushes back to her cleaning duties.
Eloise considers the paperwork before her,
thinking it would be a waste not to write anything.
A soft flip sounds as Eloise cheekily decides to read the gossip article she missed earlier.
Browsing the pages, Eloise looks for entertainment in the comment section after finding the articles dull. Eloise notices that people are still gossiping about a feud involving the mysterious Countess Olsen.
A spark of recognition hits Eloise as the name of the Olsen family sounds strangely familiar.
A portrait reveals Countess Olsen, a widow who has been managing her late husband's mining business.
Eloise recalls that in 3 years, the Countess is destined to become incredibly wealthy from minerals.
Remembering a failed negotiation for shoe jewels, Eloise finally places by the Countess seemed so familiar.
Eloise reviews the Jewel War article, realizing the Countess must win this critical ownership battle.
Countess Olsen's profile is shown as the narration hints at a deep secret behind her persistence. Eloise worries that the Countess might lose the mine to House Mary, contrary to the novel.
Determined to alter destiny, Eloise vows that she cannot let the Countess's ruin come to pass.
Eloise arrives at a silent, somber manor and finds the atmosphere heavy and undeniably depressing.
A weary butler leads Eloise inside as she compares the unsettling silence to a haunted mansion.
Walking through the dim halls, Eloise marvels at how wealth will eventually transform this gloomy estate. Standing by a window, the black-haired Countess Olsen looks out with a hollow, grief-stricken expression. Eloise offers a polite greeting, thanking the Countess for allowing a visit on such short notice. The Countess asks why she has come, while Eloise privately notes the woman's visible exhaustion.
Observing the Countess's helplessness, Eloise wonders if her spirit has been broken since her husband died.
Skipping the small talk, Eloise reveals she came because of the recent article in the newsletter.
Reacting with cold finality, the Countess refuses to discuss the matter and tells her guests to leave. Eloise stands her ground, urging the Countess not to turn away the help she desperately needs. Eloise mentions the massive Torreya tree at the mine, causing a stir of recognition in the room. A glimmer of shock crosses the Countess's face as Eloise correctly identifies her true desire, to protect the land. Startled and vulnerable, the Countess demands to know how Eloise could possibly know her private motivations. Inwardly, Eloise admits she knows the secret because she read the original novel's tragic plot. The Countess declares her refusal to yield the mine, but Eloise insists she has completely misunderstood the visit. Confusion replaces the Countess' hostility as she asks for clarification on the Duchess's cryptic intentions. Framed by blooming flowers, Eloise confidently promises to ensure the mine remains in the Countess's possession. A narrative caption notes that no one can win against a person who refuses to yield. Eloise acknowledges the Countess's legendary stubbornness while noting that even a Marquess cannot force her to bend. Behind the Countess's stoic frame, the red background emphasizes her reputation for being as stubborn as a bull.
A montage reveals how the Countess was often misunderstood by a judging and gossiping high society.
Following a sharp clench, Eloise points out that staying silent only makes it impossible for others to understand.
The Countess hopes to overturn the Emperor's mineral allocation, but Eloise bluntly warns she will lose everything. The black-haired Countess looks stunned by the Duchess's sudden and harsh assessment of her failing situation.
Grasping her head, Eloise reiterates her warning that the mine is on the verge of being lost. The Countess is baffled as Eloise wonders if the woman is simply naive or completely out of touch.
Eloise explains that House Mary's predatory intentions are clear, while the Countess's goals remain entirely hidden.
Following a sharp flinch, the Countess hears how outsiders view her silence as nothing more than irrational stubbornness.
Looming over her, Eloise notes that the Countess must see the fatal flaw in her current strategy.
Breaking into tears, the Countess asks what to do when she has no plans for business development.
Chibi Eloise ponders the situation, realizing the Countess actually possesses a hidden natural knack for business.
Narration confirms that regardless of her current despair, the Countess's fortune is destined to skyrocket very soon. Mountains of gold coins shimmer and fall as a symbol of the Countess's future wealth and success.
Surrounded by question marks, the Countess remains completely baffled by the Duchess's strange and confident claims.
Eloise asks what business is most profitable, leading the Countess to guess that it must be mining.
Laughing softly, Eloise corrects her and reveals that the most profitable business is actually human emotion.
Eloise takes the Countess's hand, urging her to finally share the real reason she is blocking development.
Following a flinch, the Countess hesitates to expose personal matters until Eloise warns about losing her land. Eloise explains that silence looks like irrationality and that the Countess must learn to persuade the public.
Eloise realizes her personal testimony won't be enough to stop a powerful Marquis from seizing the mine.
Eloise grins while reaching for a quill, noting that people are always vulnerable to a well-told story.
Ancient scrolls and books float by as Eloise considers why classic love stories endure for so long.
The Countess understands the logic, but admits her reputation among the nobility is currently in tatters.
Eloise lets out a mental surprised that the Countess is more self-aware than she originally assumed. Looking out the window at the clouds, Eloise suggests there is a much more effective way forward.
Various public notices and flyers are shown posted on a wall to represent the power of information.
Eloise explains they will use public opinion papers to sway the narrative in the Countess's favor.
Recalling modern social media dynamics, Eloise's intense expression makes the Countess feel a bit uneasy.
Eloise dismisses the Countess's worry and asks exactly how many servants have abandoned the manor recently.
The scene shifts to the exterior of the silent, imposing Olsen manor.
Looking bewildered, the black-haired Countess Olsen admits she doesn't understand the Duchess's cryptic proposal. Eloise explains her strategy to use public sympathy by having former servants post their testimonies. The Countess worries about the ethics, but Eloise bluntly asks if she can afford such concerns.
With tears in her green eyes, the Countess desperately asks if this will stop the development.
Flashing a confident, bright smile, Eloise promises she will take care of everything. Eloise notes that the Emperor values public opinion, making their narrative a powerful political weapon.
Sunlight sparkles over the manor's garden as flowers bloom, softening the previously gloomy atmosphere.
A memory reveals young Felix Olsen at 10 and Therese Downing at 13.
The children frequently bickered while hiding under the massive Torreya tree to escape their parents.
Despite their constant arguments, the two found themselves meeting under the tree once a week.
10 years passed as Felix placed a flower crown on Therese, their bond growing stronger.
Therese recalls her father's plan to marry her off to save their family's declining fortune.
Feeling trapped like a bird in a cage, the young woman chose to run away. After wandering aimlessly, Therese sat under their special tree at sunset and cried into the night.
A heavy huff and puff sound as the silver-haired Felix arrives, out of breath. Startled, Therese looks up at her childhood friend, her eyes still filled with tears.
Felix takes her hands and urgently proposes, offering her a way out through their marriage.
They spent 10 happy years together, making the tree a sacred vessel for all their memories.
A sudden spring sounds as Eloise recoils in shock when the Countess dismisses her story. Deeply moved and sobbing, Eloise realizes the Countess has no idea how romantic her life is.
The Countess remains humble about her past, while Eloise passionately insists that the story is incredible.
Following a dab and wipe, Eloise's reader instincts scream that this tale will be a bestseller. Eloise takes the Countess's hand, assuring her that no one will be indifferent to her story.
The black-haired woman looks skeptical, wondering if a simple story can truly change their fate.
Framed by flowers, Eloise confidently asserts that the Countess should just sit back and watch.
They review the plan to place the first poster in the central plaza by the morning.
Following a hesitate, the Countess asks why the Duchess is going to such lengths to help.
She points out that the mine's fate has nothing to do with the Duchess's personal interests.
A chibi Eloise cheekily describes her intervention as a calculated and very profitable long-term investment.
Eloise asks for a future favor while the Countess doubts she could ever repay such help.
Knowing the mine will become a gold mine, Eloise lets out a mischievous mental hee-hee.
Eloise urges her to focus on the present and fight to protect her precious memories.
The Countess looks revitalized, her green eyes shining with a new, determined light.
The scene transitions to the grand, sun-drenched exterior of the Duchess's own estate.
Returning home, Eloise crosses paths with Ian as she makes her way down the grand staircase.
Ian notes her early return, while Eloise explains she finished her business faster than anticipated.
A sudden freeze strikes Eloise as Ian invites her to have their weekend dinner together. Eloise makes a panicked face, realizing she still needs to find a guild for her posters.
Noticing her distraction, Ian turns away and coldly suggests they can eat together another time.
The next morning dawns bright and clear over the garden of the ducal manor. Vivi excitedly rushes in to share news about the public feud between House Mary and House Olsen. A sudden chitter and chatter fills the streets as commoners gather to read the anonymous poster.
Eloise smiles to herself, satisfied that the public narrative is shifting exactly as she planned. Vivi asks if she knew about the situation, but Eloise feigns innocence regarding the poster's origin. Curious about the reaction, Eloise asks Vivi to help her prepare for a trip to town.
As Eloise and Vivi head toward the exit, Ian stands silently on the stairs, watching them. A sharp flinch escapes Eloise as she realizes Ian is observing her sudden and busy departure.
Eloise apologizes for her busy schedule, her mind already racing with excitement for her plan. Following a furrow of his brow, Ian watches her leave while Eloise suggests a later meeting.
Eloise reacts with surprise as a sudden realization ding sounds.
Following a hesitate and awkward, Eloise confirms she is headed to the city center.
Chibi Eloise is baffled that he wants to come along on a weekday. The silver-haired Ian explains he has free time today and wishes to accompany her.
Ian heads up the stairs to prepare, telling her to wait for him. With rhythmic step-step sounds, Ian departs to change for their sudden outing. Framed by flowers, a confused Eloise wonders if his behavior is the result of education.
A bustle and chatter fill the air as their carriage moves through the city.
Framed by flowers, Eloise reflects on how her simple trip with Vivi has escalated.
Looking at the public board, Ian asks if the poster caused all the commotion.
Eloise is frustrated that Ian feels nothing after reading such a heartbreaking love story. Ian remains stoic, noting he already mourned the late Count and lacks further feeling.
Following a clasp, a visualization depicts a romantic scene of a woman protecting her lover's memories.
Annoyed, Eloise points out his hypocrisy regarding his preferences for modest and gentle people.
With a Eloise explains that most people are easily moved by stories like this.
Ian gives her an intense stare, suggesting she find the romance in their own marriage.
With a humph, Eloise turns away while Ian tells her to treat Diana like a gentleman.
Ian offers a quiet, lingering stare as flowers bloom in the soft background light.
Narration confirms the Emperor withdrew his order and sided with the Olsen family.
At a tea table, the black-haired Countess repeatedly thanks Eloise for her invaluable help.
Surrounded by blooming garden flowers, the Countess insists tea is not enough to repay her.
Eloise is pleased that the Countess no longer fears losing her mine or precious tree.
The Countess expresses profound relief that their family's legacy has finally been secured.
Eloise reaches out across the table, maintaining a friendly and supportive tone during their conversation.
Eloise requests that minerals from the Olsen territory be sold exclusively to her estate at half price.
Stunned, the black-haired Countess asks for clarification on the Duchess's specific business request.
Eloise confirms her terms while the Countess wonders if that is truly all she wants.
Eloise envisions a future where Diana handles business while she enjoys a peaceful retirement.
Giddy with excitement, Eloise imagines the life her alimony from Ian will soon provide.
Eloise suggests the Countess use her restored reputation to return to high society.
Looking at her reflection in the tea, the Countess considers the Duchess's strategic advice. Following a whisper from her butler, the Countess says she will consider returning to society.
The Countess is surprised that a visitor has arrived much earlier than their scheduled evening meeting.
Eloise listens as the Countess apologizes for the interruption caused by her other visitor. The Countess explains that her cousin, a close sibling-like figure, has unexpectedly arrived.
Eloise smiles graciously, deciding to depart so the Countess can meet with her family.
A look of sheer shock crosses Eloise's face as she recognizes the incoming guest.
Framed by flowers, the handsome, brown-haired Duke Roger greets them with a warm smile.
Duke Roger apologizes for his intrusion, explaining he hurried over to meet the Duchess.
Flushed and stunned, Eloise wonders why the Duke came specifically to see her.
Roger smiles warmly while expressing his gratitude for her help toward House Olsen.
Eloise notes that while they have unusual eye colors, the cousins don't look alike otherwise.
Feeling awkward, Eloise asks the Countess if she mentioned her involvement to the Duke.
Duke Roger clarifies that he was simply persistent in asking so he could thank her.
Roger recalls encountering her at the palace, a memory that surprises the wide-eyed Eloise.
Eloise expresses her happiness that the Countess has such a reliable person to rely on.
A flash of insight hits Eloise as Roger explains how he ensured her protection.
With a nervous ahem, Eloise is impressed by how quickly Duke Roger thinks and acts.
Eloise compliments the Countess's reliable family while Roger accepts the praise with a smile.
Roger takes a chance and invites a surprised Eloise to share a meal with him sometime.
Surprised, Eloise questions Duke Roger's sudden invitation for a meal together.
Duke Roger smiles warmly while Eloise reminds herself her help wasn't purely altruistic.
Watching him, Eloise realizes the brown-haired man effectively uses his good looks as a weapon.
She contrasts the cheerful Duke Roger with her husband, the cold and stoic Ian.
Eloise tries to leave, suggesting the cousins have much to discuss in private.
Duke Roger's charming smile remains fixed as he asks for her final confirmation.
Roger insists on escorting her, leaving the hesitant Eloise feeling slightly overwhelmed by his persistence.
Eloise thinks he's cheating with that face, while a chibi Eloise reels from his charisma.
An awkward atmosphere persists as Duke Roger escorts her toward the manor's exit. Roger claims he is lucky to escort her a second time, his touch lingering.
A sudden whoosh sounds as leaves swirl around the dashing Duke Roger during their walk.
Eloise looks back at him, clearly baffled by his oddly flirtatious and persistent behavior.
Roger recalls her previous promise to meet, which Eloise dismisses as a typical noble pleasantry.
She suspects the charming brown-haired man has broken many hearts with that effortless smile.
After they part ways, Duke Roger wears a chillingly dark and mysterious expression. Returning home, Eloise is surprised to find Ian standing prominently on the grand staircase. Ian notes their frequent encounters lately, his expression unreadable as he watches her.
A whoosh of realization hits Eloise, noting Ian's office is nowhere near her path.
She is shocked, wondering if the supposedly indifferent Ian was actually waiting for her return. Dismissing the thought, Eloise faces the emotionless Ian, who asks about her recent outing.
Ian observes her busy schedule while Eloise gives a nonchalant shrug regarding her weekend plans.
Ian stares intensely, noting how long it has been since their last scheduled lesson.
Eloise suggests resuming their lessons next week, but Ian immediately cuts her off.
Ian reveals a palace invitation has arrived, specifically addressed to both of them.
A blank expression crosses the chibi Eloise's face as she processes the unexpected news. Sitting at her desk, a dazed Eloise contemplates the sudden and prestigious imperial summons. She examines the ornate seal, confirming the letter came directly from the Empress Regnant.
Eloise tries to recall the Empress's personality based on her knowledge of the novel. She remembers the Empress as a perfect, wise leader who always put her people first. The narrative highlights the Empress's devotion to her family, specifically her half-brother Ian.
Following a jingle, Eloise considers the Empress's strong marriage and lack of concubines.
Eloise is troubled, realizing she has no personal connection to the powerful female ruler.
She recalls that while Ian was frequently summoned, Eloise herself was never previously invited.
A knock-knock sounds as Vivi enters, and Eloise requests a meeting with her dressmaker.
Determined to look her best, Eloise prepares for their high-stakes visit to the Imperial Palace.
The scene shifts to the next weekend as Eloise descends the stairs in a stunning gown.
Ian waits below, looking exceptionally handsome in his white and green formal attire.
Eloise is momentarily taken aback, admiring how handsome Ian looks with his hair styled back.
A sparkle effect highlights her joy as she greets her husband for their departure. Ian blushes slightly while offering a rare, genuine compliment on her choice of dress.
Surrounded by sparkle and twinkle, Eloise credits Madame Jed for the dress's intricate detail.
Outside the manor, the grand carriage for the ducal couple arrives to take them away.
Ian offers his hand, and a step sounds as they board the carriage together.
At the palace, a bearded official bows deeply while welcoming the two honored guests.
Eloise maintains a polite smile while Ian remains silent, his expression cold and distant.
Eloise is speechless, baffled by Ian's unusually harsh and dismissive attitude toward the official.
The older man recognizes the tension, noting the familiarity between the Duke and the Duchess.
Ian gives the man a cold ignore, refusing to engage as they enter the palace.
The official leads them forward, announcing that the Empress is waiting to receive them.
The scene transitions into the palace's grand interior, lush with blooming flowers and sunlight.
Dazed by the regal surroundings, Eloise stands wide-eyed beside a stoic and elegant Ian.
Ian dryly suggests she stop gaping as a startled Eloise freezes in minor embarrassment.
A bearded official smiles warmly, noting how exceptionally close the ducal couple appears today.
Eloise questions their perceived closeness, while the man insists they are a fine sight.
Ian remains suspicious as the man claims their newfound bond is a public fact.
Ian harshly silences the official for overstepping, leaving Eloise stunned by his sudden coldness.
The official turns away as a baffled Eloise reels from the sharp, awkward confrontation.
A radiant, blonde-haired woman in noble regalia appears amidst a flurry of magical sparkles.
The elegant woman smiles brightly, her golden hair flowing in the shimmering palace light.
Formal script introduces the newcomer as Empress Regnant Alicia Carlotta Helios Levant.
Empress Alicia teases Ian for his stiffness, but he suggests she drop the act.
Alicia chuckles at Ian's lack of humor, urging him to maintain his royal dignity.
Alicia playfully defends her mischief while a shocked Eloise gasps at her bold personality.
Alicia calls Ian's attitude cute, prompting a horrified Eloise to question what she heard.
An annoyed Ian sees while Eloise wonders if Ian and cute even belong together.
The Sun Palace shines as Alicia reveals she couldn't wait for her brother's visit.
Giggling hee-hee, the Empress admits she used a palace mage to play a small prank.
Ian offers a grimace while the Empress laughs, having found the ruse quite entertaining. A confused Eloise wonders if this playful ruler is truly the Empress from the novel.
Narration depicts the Empress as a wise, armored warrior and Ian's most steadfast ally.
Alicia's childish ha-ha baffles Eloise, as this side of her was never mentioned before.
Ian warns that Eloise is shocked by her antics, prompting Alicia to notice her guest.
Eloise flinches and lets out an ah, feeling the weight of the Empress's gaze.
Eloise offers a deep, formal greeting to the Empress as Ian stands silently beside her.
Alicia kindly tells Eloise to raise her head, despite Eloise feeling quite distant from her.
Set against soft flowers, the Empress sincerely apologizes for startling her with the joke.
A heavy silence follows as Ian and Eloise stand before the curiously watchful Empress.
Alicia laughs brightly, questioning if Ian's blunt reaction was an insult or a compliment. With an intense purple-eyed gaze, the Empress wonders what exactly changed between the couple.
Ian bristles with frustration as Alicia teases him about being ready to storm out.
Alicia ends the teasing and invites them to lunch with the waiting Emperor consort. A handsome man with long brown hair greets the couple with a graceful bow.
The Emperor consort laughs, acknowledging the long journey and the Empress's typical playful pranks. Eloise laughs awkwardly, wondering why the consort didn't try to stop the Empress's mischief.
Alicia and her husband stand together, welcoming the couple for their personal palace visit.
Alicia admits she hesitated to summon Ian after he left, though Ian finds it wise.
Eloise is shocked, noting that Ian is surprisingly rude even to his own sister.
Alicia laughs as Ian dismisses her, claiming he's far beyond his adorable younger brother years.
A lavish spread of steak, shrimp, and pastries is laid out on the grand table. The group settles in for a royal meal amidst the palace's grand and airy dining hall.
The Emperor consort mentions hearing that Eloise has grown quite close to the princess. Eloise confirms their meeting took place during the Berluz Duchy's recent seasonal party.
The consort notes the princess's strong liking for her, while Eloise expresses her humble gratitude.
Alicia observes that the two had never really been in contact before that specific event.
Eloise agrees, noting they only shared brief encounters at formal functions and her wedding.
A flashback shows a dressmaker at work, a connection Eloise shared with the young princess.
Alicia is relieved no tantrums occurred, but Eloise explains it was a gesture of thanks.
The blonde-haired princess is shown as the consort notes her rare, genuine affection for Eloise.
Empress Alicia smiles warmly, pleased by the budding friendship within the high imperial family.
The Empress explains Duchess Berluz's absence, noting official duties keep them at the villa. The blonde-haired Empress Alicia requests the ducal couple's assistance during their palace lunch.
Eloise realizes the hidden meaning behind the Empress's request regarding the young princess.
Eloise notes that the Empress is specifically addressing Ian, not her, while speaking.
Ian wonders who else could possibly handle the princess's difficult and stubborn temperament.
Ian suggests a brief visit, but Alicia criticizes him for being cold toward Eloise.
Alicia warns that sending Eloise south alone would damage the couple's public image. A startled Eloise lets out a flinch as the Empress asks for her opinion.
Ian argues that his departure from the imperial family complicates a joint trip.
Alicia firmly reminds her brother that his title does not erase his royal heritage.
Smiling warmly, Alicia insists the princess is eagerly awaiting Eloise's visit to the villa. Ian reluctantly agrees to consider the trip, satisfying his playful and persistent older sister. Eloise maintains a polite smile, though she remains wary of the Empress's hidden agenda. The royal group continues their meal within the palace's grand and sunlit dining hall. A sudden rise sounds as Ian stands to depart, citing his heavy workload.
Alicia graciously dismisses Ian while acknowledging the many duties he must attend to.
The Empress requests a private word with Eloise, leaving the Duchess feeling trapped. Alicia expresses her desire for a long overdue conversation with her sister-in-law.
Eloise is shocked, never expecting the powerful Empress to want a friendly chat. The Emperor consort invites Ian for tea, leaving the two women alone together.
Ian adjusts his cravat while promising to return for his wife very shortly. Alicia laughs ha-ha, admitting she only intended to playfully tease her younger brother. Finding her reaction ha-ha-ha charming, Alicia tells Eloise she is cuter than she looks.
The Empress laments that Ian makes little time for her since leaving the palace.
Eloise laughs, ha-ha, realizing the Empress and Ian share a remarkably similar playful streak.
Narration reveals a dark history of lethal rivalry between the former Empress and consort.
As a child, Ian was seen as a direct threat to Alicia's succession. Alicia looks out the window, reflecting on the heavy burden of her imperial past.
She softly admits that despite being siblings, she and Ian remain emotionally distant.
Political factions once manipulated Ian's legitimacy to challenge the Empress's supreme power.
The narrative explains how the nobility's pressure eventually targeted Eloise and the young princess. Alicia touches the balcony railing, acknowledging the trip might be uncomfortable for Eloise.
Behind her golden bangs, the Empress watches Eloise with an intense and calculating gaze.
A sudden swish sounds as Alicia turns, wearing a kind and reassuring smile.
Alicia urges Eloise to convince Ian, claiming the stoic Duke is tender at heart.
Eloise laughs awkwardly, certain the Empress has completely misjudged Ian's cold and distant nature.
Letting out a sniffle, chibi Alicia admits she cannot stop worrying about her brother.
Alicia leads Eloise away, predicting that Ian will be scowling upon their reunion.
The Empress warns Eloise that the supposedly cold Duke is actually terribly sensitive. Eloise stands wide-eyed, processing the Empress's unexpected and personal revelations about her husband.
Shimmering petals swirl as the radiant Empress departs, ending their revealing private conversation.
A clip-clop of hooves sounds as the ducal carriage departs the palace grounds.
Inside the carriage, a dazed Eloise realizes that things have gone unexpectedly wrong.
She worries that she has inadvertently gained too much of the Empress's personal trust.
Letting out a tired ha, Eloise sits beside her silent and unreadable husband.
Ian observes her fatigue while Eloise chooses to keep the Empress's words a secret.
Eloise reminds Ian of the specific conditions she set when they first began cooperating. She firmly reiterates her plan to divorce him if her reputation remains unchanged.
Ian looks visibly displeased, his expression darkening at the mention of their potential divorce.
Ian sighs, hey, asking if the divorce is off if their reputations improve. Ian questions if Eloise is planning a divorce, causing her to flinch in sudden shock.
Eloise awkwardly denies the divorce while internally worrying about the impending return of Princess Diana.
Ian notes the Empress's clear fondness for Eloise, who agrees despite her lingering palace nerves.
Eloise cries, wah, realizing imperial law and Diana's future happiness make her departure very difficult.
Ian explains that Eloise must personally persuade the Empress if she truly wants a divorce. Eloise trembles with frustration, silently cursing the difficult and emotionally distant Duke beside her.
The sun shines brightly over the elegant and peaceful facade of the Grand Palace buildings. Letting out a tired ha, Eloise worries that the Empress trusts her far too much.
A royal seal stamps a document as Eloise laments her failing plan for a quiet divorce.
Ian maintains a stoic and refined appearance, his expression remaining unreadable and characteristically cold.
A step sounds as red-haired Kyle approaches a sighing Eloise in the palace garden.
After an awkward ahem, Kyle introduces himself to the startled and curious Duchess.
Kyle encourages Eloise to drop formalities, though she finds his overly friendly attitude quite frivolous.
Chibi Kyle smiles brightly, making Eloise question why Ian keeps such a playful person around.
Eloise asks why Kyle is skipping training, but the red-haired man playfully deflects her questioning.
Kyle listens intently as Eloise begins to open up about her secret internal struggles.
Kyle explains he noticed her troubled expression and offers to walk through the garden together. Smiling warmly, Kyle offers to be a supportive conversational partner for the worried Duchess.
Eloise decides to confide in Kyle, hoping that talking will ease her heavy heart.
Taking a step, Eloise confesses that there is someone she cares for very deeply.
Eloise ahems, explaining her desire to support this person from the shadows.
Eloise internally struggles to explain her unconditional support for her bias, the young princess.
Kyle asks if she simply wants to stay close and show this person affection.
Kyle observes that her ultimate goal is simply the happiness of the one she cares for.
Eloise fidgets anxiously, asking Kyle for advice on how to truly help someone.
Kyle firmly reassures Eloise that her sincere efforts will eventually lead to a positive outcome.
Kyle leans closer, suggesting the person she supports likely already understands her true feelings.
Eloise looks at him hopefully, and Kyle confirms his belief with a confident smile. Eloise finds Kyle's perspective oddly comforting, even though he doesn't know she means Diana. During a quiet meal, Ian unexpectedly acknowledges that Eloise has been faithful to her role.
A stunned Eloise wonders what prompted Ian's sudden and uncharacteristic moment of praise. Ian lets out an awkward ahem, admitting his compliment was just something he felt like saying.
Eloise thanks him for the recognition, though she finds the random compliment quite strange.
Ian asks if she will accompany the princess, and Eloise feels pressured by the Empress's request. A clack sounds as a frustrated Eloise reacts to Ian's offer of total freedom.
Eloise flinches, asking if the Grand Duke has decided whether to join the trip himself.
Eloise worries about being left alone with the imperial family if Ian decides to stay behind.
The dark, forbidding palace serves as a constant reminder of Ian's painful and traumatic past.
Narration reveals Ian was once treated as a mere pawn by his ambitious birth mother.
Ian's childhood abuse caused him to emotionally isolate himself, creating a wall between him and Diana.
Eloise hopes mending Ian's relationship with the Empress will benefit both him and the princess.
A sudden flash of inspiration hits Eloise as she realizes how to change the future. As they finish their meal, Ian asks if Eloise has any free time for him today.
They visit a market to buy a birthday present for the young Princess Diana. Ian is skeptical about finding a suitable royal gift among common market household goods.
The blonde Princess Diana is shown pouting, her difficult personality legendary within the palace.
Eloise leans forward, searching for a specific shop she remembers from the original novel.
Letting out a hee-hee, Eloise finds the store, causing Ian to jolt at her excitement. Ian is surprised by their destination, but Eloise confirms this is exactly where they're going.
They step inside, causing the bearded shopkeeper to jolt in surprise at his noble visitors.
Eloise asks the bearded shopkeeper for ribbons and lace, and he confirms his stock.
Turning to her silent husband, Eloise asks if any of the items catch his eye. Ian leans in with a whisper, asking if Eloise harbors some secret grudge against the princess. As Ian continues his murmur, a confused Eloise wonders what could have prompted such a question.
Eloise snaps back, telling Ian to just pick something he likes instead of making comments.
A crash of nerves hits the shopkeeper as Ian notes all the ribbons look identical.
Giving him a sidelong glance, Eloise urges Ian to find a color that suits the princess.
Eloise firmly reminds the Duke of her earlier instructions regarding the art of picking gifts.
Ian asks if he truly must choose, and Eloise gleefully confirms that he absolutely must.
Looking at the display, Ian remains silent as he carefully considers the various colorful rolls.
A swish sounds as a sparkle highlights a piece of ribbon being selected from the pile.
Eloise approves of the choice, signaling the shopkeeper to show them even more of his stock.
The counter is soon covered in an elegant array of shimmering ribbons and delicate white lace.
Ian reaches for a dark purple ribbon while letting out a thoughtful about the color.
A slight blush colors Ian's face as he examines the ribbon he has finally decided upon.
Eloise points out the ribbon perfectly matches the specific eye color of the young Princess Diana.
Beaming with joy, Eloise declares that the rich purple shade will suit the princess perfectly.
Ian looks dazed as Eloise begins to murmur about the specific design for the gift.
Turning to the shopkeeper, Eloise asks for his professional opinion on their chosen ribbon color. With a graceful swish, Eloise explains her vision for a fancy and unique hair accessory.
The shopkeeper reacts with a surprised, "A ribbon?" never expecting such a specific custom request. He admits that most customers simply buy the materials and leave without asking for more. Curious, the shopkeeper asks how the Duchess knew he was a specialist in making ribbons.
Eloise notes the obvious quality of his work and asks how long the custom piece will take.
Eloise promises to return soon and asks for the total price of the custom hair accessory.
After hearing the price, Eloise suggests paying a deposit, leaving the Duke to handle the funds. Eloise laughs while admitting she forgot her wallet, leaving a speechless Ian to settle the bill.
Ian lets out a tired "ha," reaching for his purse while the shopkeeper looks unhappily.
Eloise tells the man to write his contact info, hinting that someone else will soon meet it.
The shopkeeper waves goodbye, wishing the couple a wonderful time on their market date together.
The couple sits on a park bench as a satisfied munch sounds from their crepe snack.
Ian holds up the chocolate-filled treat, asking if she truly enjoys such sugary street food.
Eloise explains it's the capital's most famous shop, while Ian dryly notes it is extremely sweet.
Eloise insists the sweetness is the point, clearly relishing every bite of the popular dessert.
Ian watches her eat with a rare, soft expression, his cold demeanor momentarily melting away.
Without warning, Ian reaches out to wipe a stray bit of crepe from Eloise's face. A startled Chibi Eloise wonders what he's doing as Ian points out her messy eating. Eloise huffs that he should have just told her, but Ian says she looked too busy.
A lick sounds as Ian unthinkingly tastes the sweet chocolate from his own finger.
Ian looks at his hand while Eloise stares in stunned silence at his incredibly bold action.
A bright blush spreads across Eloise's face as she processes the intimate moment they just shared.
Chibi Eloise stammers in shock, while a confused Ian doesn't seem to realize what he's done.
Ian begins to hesitate, finally noticing Eloise's intense reaction and feeling a sudden surge of embarrassment.
After an awkward ahem, Eloise insists on handling her own face from now on.
The scene shifts to a charming boutique marked by a sign featuring a small pink dress.
Ian notes the ribbon turned out well as they arrive at their next important destination.
A jingle of the shop bell sounds as they step inside the high-end dress boutique.
The purple-haired dressmaker is stunned to see the Grand Duke himself standing in her shop.
Eloise greets her warmly, explaining they've come to discuss the specific dress the princess ordered.
The dressmaker recalls the yellow dress Diana requested for her upcoming summer vacation at the villa.
The dressmaker marvels at the exquisite ribbon accessory, wondering how such quality exists in the wholesale market. Handing over a note, Eloise ensures the dressmaker knows exactly who to credit for the custom-made accessory.
A dramatic da-dun sounds as Eloise proudly names Grand Duke Ian Cloud as the official gift giver.